The winter that killed Thomas Voss wasn't the coldest on record, but it was mean. The kind of cold that found every crack in a poorly built cabin, every gap in worn-out boots, every weakness in a man's lungs until pneumonia settled in like an unwanted guest who'd come to stay. Rowena heard him die just before dawn on a Tuesday, not peacefully. Thomas had never done anything peacefully in his life, and dying was no exception. He fought it with the same stubborn fury he'd brought to everything else. Failed mining ventures, bad card games, promises he couldn't keep. But the fever won anyway, the way it always did on the frontier when winter stretched too long and medicine was too expensive and hope was something you couldn't afford to waste money on. She sat beside his body for maybe an hour after, not crying, just staring at the gray light creeping through gaps in the wallboards. 4 children slept in the next room, unaware their father was gone, unaware that everything was about to get so much worse. The knock came around mid-morning. Rowena knew who it was before she opened the door. Edgar Milhouse, the land agent, stood on her porch with that expression men wore when they were about to ruin your life but wanted you to know they felt terrible about it. Snow dusted his expensive coat, his breath fogged in the freezing air. Mrs. Voss. He removed his hat, revealing thinning hair slicked with pomade. I heard about Thomas. My condolences. She didn't invite him inside. What do you want, Edgar? I'm afraid I'm here on business. He pulled papers from inside his coat. Your husband borrowed against this property 18 months ago. The loan was due in December. It's now January, and he's been dead 3 hours. I understand this is difficult, but 3 hours, Edgar. Milhouse had the decency to look uncomfortable, but he didn't leave. Men like him never did. The bank needs repayment, $47 plus interest. If you can't settle the debt, they'll have to repossess. $47 might as well have been $4,000. Rowena had maybe $6 to her name, and that was counting the coins Thomas had hidden in his tobacco tin. Coins she'd only found last night while searching for anything valuable enough to sell. I've got 4 children and a dead husband. Her voice came out flat, emotionless. She was too tired for anger. You really think I've got $47 lying around? I'm sorry, Mrs. Voss, I truly am. But if payment isn't received by week's end, you'll need to vacate the property. He left the papers on the porch railing and retreated down the steps, probably eager to escape before she started crying or screaming or whatever women were supposed to do in situations like this. But Rowena just stood there, watching him disappear into the snow, feeling nothing. Numbness was easier than feeling. Inside, her eldest daughter, Lena, was awake, standing in the doorway to the children's room. At 13, Lena had inherited Thomas's dark hair and Rowena's sharp cheekbones, but lately, she'd developed a way of looking at the world that made her seem much older, like she'd already figured out life was mostly disappointment and hard choices. Papa's dead, isn't he? Lena's voice was steady. No tears. Yes. That man who was here? We're losing the house? Yes. Lena nodded slowly, processing. What are we going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? What the hell were they going to do? The obvious answer, the one everyone in Blackstone Ridge expected, was for Rowena to throw herself on the mercy of the church ladies who organized charity drives and spoke in soft voices about unfortunate circumstances. She could beg for handouts, accept whatever scraps the community felt generous enough to provide, and slowly watch her children grow hollow-eyed and hungry, while neighbors whispered about what a shame it all was. The alternative was worse. Marry again, quickly, to whoever would take a widow with 4 children and no dowry. There were men in town who'd consider it. Owen Pritchard, the widower who ran the general store and had a reputation for being handsy with female customers. Or maybe Frank Gulliver, twice her age and mean when he drank, which was most evenings. Both options made her stomach turn. So she spent that day doing what needed doing, wrapping Thomas in the best sheet they owned, getting the minister to say words over a body they'd have to bury in spring when the ground thawed, explaining to her 3 sons that Papa was gone and wouldn't be coming back. 8-year-old Daniel cried. 6-year-old Marcus asked if they were going to die too. Little Jacob, barely 3, didn't understand any of it and kept asking when Papa would wake up. That night, after the children finally slept, Rowena sat at the kitchen table with Thomas's tobacco tin and took inventory of her life. $6.30 in coins. A wedding ring she could maybe pawn for another $3. Some clothes, mostly worn through. Kitchen implements. Thomas's rifle. Except she'd already sold that last month to pay for firewood. Nothing else, nothing valuable. Nothing that added up to a future. That's when she found the note. It had been tucked beneath the tin's false bottom, written in Thomas's messy scrawl on a scrap of old newspaper. Just 2 lines. Garrick Thorne, Iron Mesa Ranch, 40 miles south. If things go bad, he's the only one who'll help. Rowena stared at those words for a long time. She'd heard Thomas mention Garrick exactly twice during their marriage. The first time was years ago, when he'd gotten drunk and started rambling about his time working cattle drives in Texas. Garrick Thorne, he'd said, that man saved my life once, pulled me out of a stampede that should have killed me, said if I ever needed anything, all I had to do was ask. The second mention came last fall, right before the first snow, when Thomas was deep in his cups and feeling sorry for himself. Should have stayed with Garrick, he'd muttered. Man pays his debts, keeps his word. Best boss I ever had. But I had to go chasing fool's gold instead. Thomas had been full of stories. Most of them were exaggerations or outright lies, and Rowena had learned early in their marriage not to trust everything he said. But something about the way he'd talked about Garrick felt different. There was respect there, buried under the whiskey and regret. And Thomas hadn't respected many people. 40 miles south, Iron Mesa Ranch. Rowena pulled out the old survey map Thomas kept in the drawer and found it. A massive property marked in the southeastern territories, right up against the mountain ranges where the frontier started, giving way to wilderness. 40 miles might as well have been 1,000. She had no horse, no wagon, no way to transport 4 children across that distance in the middle of winter. And even if she somehow managed it, there was no guarantee this Garrick Thorne would help her. He might turn them away. He might not even exist. Thomas had been known to invent convenient solutions to problems he had no intention of actually solving. But staying in Blackstone Ridge meant slow starvation or worse. And Rowena was done accepting worse. She made her decision sometime around 3 in the morning, in that dark hour when exhaustion and desperation start looking like clarity. They'd walk. It was insane. Suicidal, probably. 40 miles through winter territory with 4 children, the youngest barely able to walk on his own. No supplies, no shelter, no backup plan. But death by trying felt better than death by giving up. Over the next 2 days, Rowena prepared as best she could. She sold everything that wasn't absolutely necessary. The good plates, Thomas's Sunday coat, the carved headboard from their bed. That gave her another $11. She spent it on dried beans, salted pork, hard biscuits, and 2 wool blankets. Not enough. Nowhere near enough. But it would have to do. She stitched her remaining coins into the lining of her skirt where desperate men wouldn't think to look. Packed what little clothes the children had. Wrapped Jacob in every layer of fabric she could spare, and fashioned a sling to carry him against her chest. The night before they left, she stood in the cabin doorway and looked at the only home her children had ever known. It wasn't much. Drafty, cramped, constantly falling apart. But it was theirs. Had been theirs. Lena appeared beside her, silent as always. You scared? Rowena asked. Yes. No hesitation. But staying here's scarier. Smart girl. Too smart, maybe. Children shouldn't have to calculate odds like that. We're going to walk for a long time, Rowena said. It's going to be hard. Harder than anything you've done. There might be times you want to quit. Will you quit? No. Then I won't either. They left Blackstone Ridge before dawn on a Thursday morning, when the sky was still dark and the streets were empty. No goodbyes. No one to see them off. Just a widow and 4 children walking out of town like ghosts nobody would remember. The first day wasn't terrible. The road was relatively clear, the weather held, and the children were still energized by the novelty of it all. An adventure, Daniel kept calling it. Marcus pretended to be a frontier scout. Even Jacob seemed content, bouncing against Rowena's chest as she walked. They covered maybe 8 miles before stopping for the night in an abandoned grain storage building someone had left to rot beside the road. It was freezing, but at least the walls blocked the wind. Rowena rationed out beans and biscuits, made sure each child drank water from the canteen she'd filled at the last creek they'd passed. Lena helped settle her brothers, then sat beside Rowena in the dark. How far did we get today? She asked. 8 miles, maybe. So, 5 more days? If everything went perfectly, if the weather held, if they didn't get lost, if none of the children got sick or injured, if they didn't run into anyone dangerous on the road. Maybe, Rowena said instead. The second day was harder. The novelty wore off. Daniel complained about his feet hurting. Marcus kept asking when they could rest. Jacob grew fussy and wouldn't stop crying, which meant Rowena had to bounce him constantly while walking, which made her back ache. The road turned rough, rutted with frozen mud that grabbed at their boots. Wind picked up, carrying ice crystals that stung exposed skin. They passed 2 homesteads, but Rowena didn't stop. Couldn't risk strangers asking questions, or worse, offering help that came with conditions. They managed 7 miles that day. By the 3rd morning, everyone was miserable. The dried beans were gone. Rowena had underestimated how much 4 growing children could eat when they were walking all day. The salted pork was almost finished. Her boots, which were already worn before they started, had split along the seams. She could feel blisters forming with every step. But they kept walking. What else could they do? The road began climbing into hill country, which meant slower progress and steeper grades. Daniel developed a cough. Marcus's lips cracked and bled from the cold. Jacob just whimpered constantly, too exhausted to even cry properly anymore. And Lena stopped talking. Not gradually, just one moment she was answering questions, and the next she'd gone completely silent. Her eyes stayed open, watching everything, but when Rowena asked if she was okay, Lena just nodded without speaking. That scared Rowena more than anything else. The silence felt like something breaking inside her daughter, something that might not be fixable. That night they had no shelter at all, just a cluster of rocks that blocked some of the wind. Rowena made the children huddle together under both blankets while she sat watch, trembling so hard her teeth chattered. Blood had soaked through her socks, freezing them to her feet. When she tried to peel them off to check the damage, pain shot up her legs so sharp she nearly vomited. She left the socks on. Morning came eventually, the way it always did, indifferent to suffering. Day 4 was the worst. They ran completely out of food. Rowena gave the children the last of the water and told them she wasn't thirsty, which was a lie. She was so thirsty her tongue felt swollen, her lips cracked and bleeding. The landscape turned hostile, all scrub brush and rocky terrain. Twice she spotted movement that might have been snakes. Though in winter they should have been hibernating. Couldn't risk it either way. Steered the children wide around anything suspicious. Daniel collapsed around midday. Just stopped walking and sat down in the middle of the road, eyes unfocused. "I can't," he whispered. "Mama, I can't." Marcus sat down beside him. "Me neither." Rowena set Jacob down carefully and knelt in front of her sons. Her vision swam. When had she last eaten? Yesterday morning? The day before? "Look at me," she said, and her voice came out wrong, too harsh, too desperate. She tried again, softer. "Boys, look at me." They did, barely. "I know you're tired. I know it hurts. But we're more than halfway now. If we turn back, we have to walk just as far to get nowhere. The only way out is forward. You understand?" Daniel's eyes filled with tears. What if there's nothing there? What if this Garrick person won't help? That was the question, wasn't it? The one Rowena had been avoiding since they left Blackstone Ridge. "Then we figure something else out," she said. "But we're not going to quit before we even try. I want Papa." Marcus's voice broke on the word. "I know, baby. I know." But Papa was dead and they were alone and there was no one coming to save them. So they had to save themselves. She got them standing, got them walking. One foot in front of the other, slower now, barely making progress, but still moving forward because the alternative was dying beside the road, and Rowena refused to let that happen. Night fell again. No shelter. They huddled together in a dry creek bed and Rowena sang to them, old songs her mother had taught her, back before the world got complicated. Her voice cracked on every note, but the children didn't seem to notice. Lena still hadn't spoken. She just stared into the darkness with those hollow eyes. Day 5 began with frost so thick it looked like snow. Rowena could barely walk. The blisters on her feet had burst, then reformed, then burst again. Every step felt like walking on broken glass. She'd given Jacob to Lena to carry because she didn't trust herself not to drop him. They'd been traveling maybe 2 hours when Marcus spotted it first. "Mama, what's that?" On the horizon, barely visible through morning haze, fences, structures, movement that might have been livestock or people or just wishful thinking made visible. Iron Mesa Ranch. It had to be. Nothing else out here for miles. They'd made it. The realization hit Rowena so hard she actually stumbled, caught herself on Daniel's shoulder. 4 days of pure hell, and they'd actually made it. Is that it? Daniel asked. Is that the place? I think so. Are they going to help us? And there was the question that mattered, the only one that counted. I don't know, Rowena admitted, but we're about to find out. The last 2 miles took forever. The children were barely functioning, shuffling forward like small ghosts. Rowena wasn't much better. She'd wrapped cloth around her ruined boots, but blood still seeped through with every step, leaving faint marks on the frozen ground. As they got closer, the ranch revealed itself properly. It was massive, fences stretching across what looked like endless grassland, cattle visible in the distance, several outbuildings, and at the center of it all, a large ranch house that looked weathered but solid, built to last. Riders moved near the cattle lines. One of them spotted Rowena and the children approaching, and she saw him stiffen, then turn his horse and gallop back toward the main house. By the time they reached the front gate, 3 men had gathered. Ranch hands, from the look of them, hard men with sun-weathered faces and hands that knew work. They stared at Rowena and the children with expressions ranging from suspicion to outright hostility. Help you? The oldest one, gray-bearded and missing 2 fingers on his left hand, looked them up and down. His tone suggested he already knew the answer and didn't like it. I need to speak with Garrick Thorne. Rowena's voice came out stronger than she felt. My name is Rowena Voss. My husband, Thomas Voss, worked for him years ago. The men exchanged glances. Something passed between them, some shared knowledge or joke Rowena wasn't privy to. Boss don't take visitors, Graybeard said. Especially not... He paused, searching for diplomatic phrasing. People in your situation. My situation? Anger flared, hot and sudden, cutting through exhaustion. My situation is that I walked 40 miles with 4 starving children because your boss told my husband he was a man who kept his word. So either get Garrick Thorne or get out of my way. Lady, I need to speak with Garrick Thorne, now. What's going on here? The voice came from behind the ranch hands, deep and rough, carrying the kind of authority that made men move without thinking about it. The ranch hands stepped aside, revealing a man walking toward them from the main house. Garrick Thorne. He was tall, lean in the way working men got when they forgot to eat regularly and burned off everything they consumed. Maybe 40, though the frontier aged people fast. He could have been younger. His face was all hard angles and old scars, including one that ran from his left eyebrow into his hairline. Dark hair going gray at the temples, eyes the color of winter sky, cold and assessing. He looked at Rowena the way someone might look at a wounded animal on the road, calculating whether it was worth the effort to put it out of its misery. Then his gaze moved to the children, lingered on Lena's hollow stare, Daniel's trembling frame, Marcus barely staying upright, Jacob silent in his sister's arms. Something changed in Garrick's expression, not softening exactly, but some calculation shifting. You're Rowena Voss? His voice gave nothing away. Yes. Thomas Voss's widow. Not a question. Somehow he already knew Thomas was dead. Yes. Garrick studied her for a long moment. She could feel him cataloging details. The blood on her boots, the way she swayed slightly, the desperate pride she was clinging to like armor. You walked here, he said finally. 40 miles. 43, actually. We started in Blackstone Ridge. In winter, with 4 children. Yes? Why? The question was so direct it caught her off guard. No preamble, no sympathy, no dancing around the obvious. Just, why? Because staying meant dying, Rowena said simply, and I wasn't about to bury anyone else. Silence stretched between them. Behind Garrick, more ranch hands had gathered, drawn by the commotion. She could feel them staring, judging, already deciding she and her children were problems they didn't need. Then Garrick did something unexpected. He looked directly at Graybeard and said, Get the doc. Boss, I don't think... Get him. Now. No room for argument in that tone. And have someone prepare rooms in the East Wing. 4 beds, proper linens. The ranch hands didn't move, stunned. Did I stutter? Garrick's voice dropped lower, more dangerous. Move. They scattered. Garrick turned back to Rowena. For the first time, something almost resembling warmth touched his expression. Almost. You got guts, I'll give you that. He stepped forward and opened the gate. Stupid as hell, walking that distance in your condition, but guts. I didn't have much choice. Everyone's got choices. Yours just all sucked. He gestured toward the house. Come on, let's get those kids fed before they collapse. Rowena took one step forward, and her legs just gave out. She didn't remember falling. One moment she was standing, the next she was on the ground with Garrick crouched beside her, steadying her with one scarred hand on her shoulder. Easy, he said, and his voice had changed, gentler somehow, like he was talking to a spooked horse. When's the last time you ate? She had to think about it. Day before yesterday. Maybe. Jesus Christ. He stood, then shocked her by simply scooping her up like she weighed nothing. Hey, someone get these kids, move. Ranch hands rushed forward, lifting Daniel and Marcus, taking Jacob from Lena's arms. Lena just stood there, silent and staring. She talks? Garrick asked Rowena. She used to. He nodded like that explained something. Then he called out to a younger ranch hand hovering nearby. Billy, take the girl's hand, lead her inside, gentle, you hear me? Yes, boss. As they moved toward the house, Rowena tried to process what was happening. The exhaustion, the hunger, the days of terror, all of it was crashing down at once, making everything feel surreal. You're helping us, she said, her voice small. Why? Garrick didn't look at her, just kept walking. Thomas Voss saved my life once. Took a bullet meant for me during a ranch raid outside Del Rio. Never could properly repay that debt. Thomas never mentioned he wouldn't have. Man had a lot of flaws, but he wasn't the type to brag about being shot. They reached the porch steps. Besides, anyone who walks 40 miles through winter hell with 4 kids under these conditions either has incredible courage or terrible judgment, maybe both. Either way, you earned a meal and a bed. Inside, the ranch house was warm. Blessedly, impossibly warm. Rowena could feel herself starting to shake. Not from cold anymore, but from the sudden absence of it. Garrick set her down in a chair near the fireplace. Doc will be here soon. He'll check you and the kids, make sure nothing's broken or infected. I can't pay and didn't ask you to. But, Mrs. Voss, he looked at her directly, and those cold winter sky eyes weren't cold anymore. They were tired, familiar with loss in a way that recognized itself in others. Stop arguing. You're here now. You're safe. Let that be enough for tonight. A woman appeared, older, Mexican, with iron gray hair and a no-nonsense expression. She took one look at the children and started issuing rapid orders in Spanish to people Rowena couldn't see. That's Rosa, Garrick said. She runs the kitchen and most everything else around here. She'll get the kids fed. She knows what they need. Trust her. It went against every instinct Rowena had, letting someone else take care of her children. But Daniel and Marcus were already being led away by Rosa, who was making soothing sounds and promising food. Billy still held Lena's hand, speaking softly to her even though she didn't respond. Rowena watched them disappear into another room, and suddenly she was alone with Garrick Thorne in his massive ranch house, feeling more vulnerable than she had at any point during the 43-mile walk. Thank you, she managed. He shrugged. Thank me when you're not half dead. A younger man rushed in, the doctor, she assumed, carrying a medical bag and looking annoyed at being summoned so urgently. What's the emergency this time, Garrick? Because if someone got kicked by a horse again... He stopped, seeing Rowena. His expression shifted to professional concern. Oh. Check her feet first, Garrick said. Then general assessment. Kids, too. They're in the kitchen. How many patients are we talking about? 5 total. The doctor sighed but moved toward Rowena, already opening his bag. Right. Let's see the damage. Unwrapping her boots was agony. The cloth had frozen to the blood, and pulling it free felt like tearing skin off. The doctor made sympathetic noises but didn't stop, efficient and practiced. When he finally got her feet exposed, he went very quiet. How long were you walking on these? He asked softly. 4 days. 4. He looked up at Garrick. She needs to stay off her feet completely for at least a week, maybe 2. These need to be cleaned, treated, bandaged properly. I'll also want to check for frostbite. Do whatever needs doing, Garrick said. She's staying. I can't just... Rowena started. Yes, you can. Garrick's tone left no room for argument. You walked 43 miles to ask for help. I'm giving it. Don't insult us both by trying to leave tomorrow. The doctor worked in silence after that, cleaning and bandaging while Rowena bit down on her lip to keep from screaming. When he finished with her feet, he checked her hands, looked in her eyes, listened to her breathing. You're dehydrated, malnourished, and exhausted, he said finally. But you'll live. The kids? Now. He nodded and left, taking his bag toward where Rosa had led the children. Alone again with Garrick, Rowena felt reality settling around her like a heavy coat. They'd made it. Against all odds, they'd actually made it. Her children would eat tonight, sleep in beds, be warm. I can work, she said abruptly, to pay for our keep. I can cook, clean, help with... Stop. Garrick held up one hand. Tomorrow. We'll talk about all that tomorrow. Tonight, you're going to eat something, get those feet properly treated, and sleep for about 12 hours. In that order. But that's not a request, Mrs. Voss. Rosa returned then, carrying a bowl of something that smelled like heaven. Soup, thick with vegetables and meat. She set it in Rowena's hands and waited, arms crossed, until Rowena took the first spoonful. It was the most delicious thing she'd ever tasted. She finished the bowl in silence, not realizing how hungry she truly was until food was in front of her. Rosa immediately replaced it with another bowl, and Rowena ate that too, slower this time. The children? She asked between bites. Eating like they haven't seen food in days, Rosa said, her English accented but clear. The little ones will sleep soon. The girl... She glanced at Garrick. She still hasn't spoken? No. Give her time. Sometimes silence is how we survive. Rowena finished her second bowl. Exhaustion was pulling at her now, making her eyelids heavy. Come on, Rosa said gently. I'll show you where you'll sleep. Your children are already in their room. I should check on them. I'll take you past their door first. You can look in, see they're safe. That was enough. Had to be enough. Rosa helped Rowena stand. Her bandaged feet screamed in protest and slowly guided her through the house. They passed the children's room where Daniel, Marcus, and Jacob were already asleep in one large bed tucked under heavy quilts. Lena sat in a chair by the window, still awake, still silent. She won't sleep? Rowena asked. Not yet, but she will. I'll stay with her until she does. The room Rosa led her to was simple but clean, a real bed with actual sheets, a wash basin, a window that looked out over dark grasslands. It felt impossibly luxurious. Sleep, Rosa commanded. Everything else waits for morning. She left, closing the door softly behind her. Rowena stood alone in the room, swaying slightly. She should wash, should check her feet again, should do 100 things. Instead, she collapsed onto the bed and was unconscious before her head fully hit the pillow. Outside in the main room, Garrick stood by the fireplace, staring into the flames. Graybeard appeared beside him. You sure about this, boss? Taking in a widow and 4 kids? That's a lot of extra mouths. Thomas Voss took a bullet for me. That was 15 years ago, and he's dead. You don't owe him any more. Garrick was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, She walked 43 miles in winter carrying 4 children. You know what that takes? The kind of strength it requires? Desperation. More than that. Determination. Refusal to quit even when quitting makes sense. He turned to look at Graybeard. We could use someone like that around here. Or she could be nothing but trouble. Maybe. Probably. Garrick turned back to the fire. But I'm not turning away someone who fought that hard to survive. Make sure the hands know she and the kids are under protection. Anyone has a problem with it, they can leave. Graybeard nodded slowly. You're the boss. That's right, I am. After he left, Garrick remained by the fire for a while longer, thinking about Thomas Voss, about debts and choices, and the way the frontier chewed people up and spit out whatever was left. Then he thought about Rowena's face when she'd said I wasn't about to bury anyone else. That kind of determination was rare. and Iron Mesa Ranch was about to need every ounce of it they could get. Rowena woke to sunlight slicing through unfamiliar windows and the sharp realization that she'd slept through an entire night without waking once. No crying children, no freezing drafts, no gnawing hunger keeping her eyes open in the dark. Just sleep, deep and dreamless. For about 3 seconds, it felt like peace. Then her feet reminded her they existed. The pain hit like someone had driven nails through her soles. She gasped, sitting up too fast, and the room spun sideways. Her head felt stuffed with cotton, her mouth tasted like copper, and every muscle in her body screamed in protest. A soft knock at the door, then Rosa's voice. "You awake?" "Yes." It came out as a croak. Rosa entered carrying a tray, more food, a pitcher of water, and what looked like fresh bandages. She set everything on the small table by the bed and studied Rowena with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen plenty of suffering. "The doctor wants to check your feet again this morning. Says if there's infection, we catch it early." She poured water into a cup and handed it over. "Drink. All of it." Rowena obeyed, too tired to argue. The water was cold and clean, probably from a well. She drank 3 cups before her body stopped demanding more. "My children." "Already awake, already fed. The little ones are outside with some of the younger ranch hands, learning about horses." Rosa started unwrapping Rowena's bandages with gentle efficiency. "The girl is in the kitchen with me, still not talking, but she ate breakfast." "Lena." Saying her daughter's name out loud made everything feel more real somehow. "Her name is Lena. Pretty name. She's a pretty girl. Looks like you." The bandages came off, revealing feet that looked like raw meat. Blisters upon blisters, some burst and weeping, others swollen and angry. The skin between her toes had cracked and bled. Rosa made a soft sound, not quite sympathy, more like recognition. "I walked from Sonora to Texas once," she said quietly, cleaning the wounds with something that stung like fire. "Took me 3 weeks. My feet looked worse than this by the end." "What were you running from?" "Same thing everyone runs from out here. Bad men, worse choices, no future." She started applying fresh bandages. "But I survived, like you survived. That's what we do." The doctor arrived while Rosa was finishing up. He was younger than Rowena had realized last night, maybe 30, with tired eyes and hands that moved with practiced certainty. He examined her feet without speaking, then sat back on his heels. "You're lucky," he said. "No signs of infection yet, and I don't think you'll lose any toes. But you need to stay off these for at least a week, maybe longer." "I can't just—" "Yes, you can." He started packing his supplies. "Garrick already cleared it. You're staying, not negotiable." After he left, Rosa helped Rowena into a dress someone had left folded on the chair. Simple cotton, slightly too big, but clean. The luxury of clean clothes felt almost obscene. "Whose dress is this?" "Was mine, years ago, before I got fat." Rosa smiled. "Now it's yours. Come. I'll help you to the kitchen. You can sit with Lena while I work." Getting to the kitchen required Rosa's support and a walking stick someone had left by the door. Every step sent pain shooting up Rowena's legs, but she gritted her teeth and managed. She'd survived worse. The kitchen was massive, dominated by a huge iron stove and long wooden tables scarred with years of use. Lena sat at one end, peeling potatoes with mechanical precision. She looked up when Rowena entered, and something flickered in her eyes. Relief, maybe, or just recognition that she wasn't completely alone here. "Morning, sweetheart." Rowena lowered herself into a chair across from her daughter, trying not to wince. "You sleep okay?" Lena nodded. Still, no words. "Your brothers are outside. You want to join them after?" Another nod. But Lena's hands kept moving, peeling potatoes like her life depended on it. Rowena understood. Work was easier than feeling, easier than thinking about everything they'd lost and how fragile their current safety was. So she didn't push. Just sat there, keeping her daughter company in silence while Rosa moved around the kitchen, humming something in Spanish. Around mid-morning, Garrick appeared in the doorway. He looked different in daylight, still hard-edged and scarred, but less intimidating somehow. Or maybe Rowena was just too tired to be intimidated anymore. "You can walk?" he asked. "Barely." "Good enough. Need to talk to you about some things. You up for it?" Rosa shot him a look that could have stripped paint. She needs rest. She can rest after. This is important. He looked at Rowena. Unless you'd rather wait. Part of her wanted to say yes, wanted to hide in this warm kitchen where nothing was demanded of her yet. But she hadn't walked 43 miles just to be a burden. I can talk. They moved to what Garrick called his office, a small room off the main house, filled with ledgers, maps, and the smell of old tobacco. He gestured to a chair and she sank into it gratefully. How much do you know about ranching? He asked, settling behind his desk. Nothing. Thomas worked cattle drives before we married, but he never talked about it much. Right. Well, here's the situation. He pulled out a ledger, flipped it open. Iron Mesa is big, about 40,000 acres, give or take. We run about 3,000 head of cattle, employ 22 hands, and barely break even most years. Rowena waited. There was more coming. Problem is, everyone around here wants this land. Railroad companies want right-of-way through the property. Land speculators want to carve it up and sell it to farmers. Local ranchers want the water access. He leaned back in his chair. And I've told every single one of them to go to hell. Why? Because I'm stubborn. And because once you start selling pieces of something, it's only a matter of time before there's nothing left. He studied her. But that means I've made enemies, a lot of them. What does this have to do with me? I'm getting there. He closed the ledger. You said you could work. I'm going to hold you to that. But I need to know. Are you going to run the first time things get difficult? Because difficult is basically all we do here. Rowena thought about the 43 miles, the bleeding feet, the starving children, the nights with no shelter. Then she looked Garrick Thorne directly in the eyes. I don't run. Something shifted in his expression, not quite approval, but close. Fair enough. Rosa says you can read and write? Yes. Good. I need someone to help with the books. Last man who did it got drunk and fell off his horse 3 weeks ago, broke his neck. He said it matter-of-factly, like death was just another inconvenience. Records are a mess. Supply orders are backed up. I can barely keep track of what we owe versus what we're owed. You want me to keep your books? Among other things, Rosa needs help in the kitchen. Tack needs repairing constantly. Fences need mending. There's always work. He paused. Your children can help too when they're old enough. Light work, nothing dangerous, and they eat same as everyone else. It was more than Rowena had hoped for, more than she'd dared to expect. What's the catch? No catch. You work. You earn your keep. That's how it works here. But then his expression hardened. Fair warning, though. Not everyone on this ranch is going to be happy about you being here. Some of the hands don't like strangers. Others don't like women doing anything except cooking. And a few are just generally unpleasant. I can handle unpleasant. I believe you. But if anyone gives you real trouble, and I mean real trouble, not just unfriendliness, you come to me. Understood? Why are you doing this? The question came out before she could stop it. Really? Thomas saving your life was 15 years ago. That debt's more than paid. Garrick was quiet for a long moment, staring at something on his desk. Then he said, My wife died 6 years ago. Fever. She was sick for 3 days and then she was gone. His voice stayed level, emotionless. Everyone in town told me to remarry, get on with my life, like she was a horse that died and I just needed to buy a new one. Rowena said nothing, just listened. I didn't remarry. Didn't see the point. Just worked. Kept the ranch going because stopping meant thinking, and thinking hurt too much. He looked up at her. You walked 43 miles to give your children a chance at surviving. That's not desperation, that's love. And I've seen enough people on this frontier give up and die that I recognize the difference. It was the most honest thing anyone had said to her in years. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me yet. This place eats people alive. Let's see if you last a month first. Over the next few days, Rowena discovered Garrick hadn't been exaggerating about the work. Iron Mesa Ranch operated like a small town, with all the complexity and chaos that implied. Someone was always riding out to check fences or move cattle or deal with some crisis in the far pastures. The kitchen produced 3 massive meals a day for 20-plus people. Equipment constantly broke and needed fixing. And the administrative side, the ledgers and supply orders and financial records, was a disaster. Rowena attacked the books with the same determination she'd brought to the 43-mile walk. She sat at the desk in Garrick's office, feet propped up to heel, and worked through stacks of receipts and orders and half-legible notes the previous bookkeeper had left behind. It took her 2 days to realize someone had been stealing. Not much, not enough to be obvious, but small amounts kept disappearing from the supply budget. A few dollars here, a few there. Sometimes it was listed as miscellaneous expenses or emergency repairs with no detail. Other times the numbers just didn't add up. She debated whether to mention it to Garrick. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she was reading the records wrong. But the numbers didn't lie. On the third evening, after most of the hands had finished dinner and scattered to the bunkhouse or evening chores, she found Garrick checking tack in one of the storage buildings. "Can I talk to you about something?" He looked up from the saddle he was oiling. "Problem?" "Maybe. I've been going through the books like you asked." "And?" "Someone's been skimming money. Not a lot, but consistently. It goes back at least 6 months." Garrick's expression didn't change, but something went very still in his eyes. "You sure?" "As sure as I can be without knowing who's been approving these expenses." "That would have been Vernon, the bookkeeper who died." "Then either Vernon was stealing or someone else was, and Vernon was covering for them." Garrick set down the saddle with controlled precision. "How much are we talking?" "Maybe $200 over 6 months. Like I said, not obvious. But it's there." $200 was a significant amount. Could buy supplies for months or pay several workers' wages. Garrick's jaw tightened. "Anyone else know about this?" "Just you." "Keep it that way for now." He started putting away the tack oil. If someone's stealing from inside, confronting them directly is going to make things worse. Let me handle it. But Rowena could see the worry in his face. Betrayal from within was worse than enemies outside, because you couldn't build walls against people already inside your home. That night, after the children were asleep, Rowena lay awake thinking about what she'd found, about the implications. If someone was willing to steal from the ranch, what else were they willing to do? And if Garrick confronted the wrong person, would they just deny it and get more careful? Or would they escalate? She must have dozed off eventually because she woke to voices outside. Angry voices, cutting through the pre-dawn quiet. Rowena grabbed her shawl and limped to the window. In the yard below, Garrick stood facing 3 of his ranch hands, all of them looking agitated. She couldn't hear everything they were saying, but she caught fragments. "Not our problem. Dead weight. Running a charity now?" Garrick's response was too quiet to hear, but his body language spoke volumes. Rigid, controlled, dangerous. One of the hands, a big man with a scarred face Rowena had seen around but didn't know by name, jabbed a finger toward the main house, toward where she and the children slept. "Widow and her brats, taking food from our mouths." "Oh." Garrick moved so fast, Rowena almost missed it. One moment he was standing still, the next his fist connected with the big man's jaw, hard enough to drop him into the dirt. "Anyone else want to debate this?" Garrick's voice carried now, cold and clear. "Because I'm happy to continue the conversation." The other 2 hands backed up, hands raised in surrender. "She and her children are under my protection," Garrick continued. "That means they're under this ranch's protection. Anyone has a problem with that? There's the gate. Use it." He turned and walked back toward the house, leaving the big man groaning in the dirt. Rowena moved away from the window before anyone could see her watching. Her heart was pounding. She'd known some of the hands wouldn't like her presence, but hearing it stated so bluntly, dead weight, charity, taking food, stung worse than she'd expected. She was still awake when sunrise came, sitting in the chair by her bed, thinking. Garrick found her in his office later that morning, working through more ledgers. "You heard?" "Not a question." "I saw." "I handled it." "By punching someone?" She looked up at him. "That's not going to make me more popular." "Don't care about popular. Care about safe." He leaned against the doorframe. Those men needed to understand where things stand. Now they do. And if they don't accept it, then they leave. Simple as that. But it wasn't simple. Nothing ever was. And Rowena had seen enough frontier towns to know how quickly resentment could turn into something worse. Still, she went back to work. The numbers demanded attention, and worrying wouldn't change anything. Lena started speaking again on the 7th day. Not much, just small things, yes and no and thank you. But it was progress. She'd started following Rosa around the kitchen, learning how to knead bread and season stew and manage the massive stove. Rosa treated her with patient kindness, never pushing, never demanding more than Lena could give. Daniel and Marcus had taken to ranch life like they'd been born to it. They spent hours with the younger hands, learning about horses and cattle and all the 1,000 small tasks that kept a ranch functioning. Jacob mostly toddled around getting into trouble and being spoiled by everyone who crossed his path. Rowena's feet were healing, slowly, painfully, but healing. She could walk short distances now without the stick, though standing too long made everything ache. 2 weeks after they'd arrived, she was alone in the office when someone knocked. She looked up to find a man she didn't recognize standing in the doorway, older, well-dressed, with the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Help you?" she asked. "Looking for Garrick Thorne. I'm Edgar Milhouse from Blackstone Ridge. We have some business to discuss." The name hit her like cold water. Edgar Milhouse, the land agent who'd come to take her cabin. He hadn't recognized her yet. She looked different now, better fed, cleaner, wearing a proper dress instead of trail-worn rags. But she recognized him instantly. "Mr. Thorne isn't available right now," she said carefully. "I can wait." Milhouse stepped into the office, looking around with casual interest. "Nice operation he's got here. Big property. Valuable." "If you say so." His eyes landed on her, really looking now. She saw the moment recognition hit, his expression shifting from polite disinterest to genuine shock. "Mrs. Voss?" "Hello, Edgar." "What? How?" He actually stammered. "You're here at Iron Mesa?" "Apparently. But I thought, the cabin, you had no money." "Still don't, actually, but I found something better than money." She met his eyes steadily. "Friends." Milhouse recovered his composure with visible effort. "I see. Well, that's unexpected. Life's full of surprises." "Indeed." He glanced at the ledgers spread across the desk. "Working here now, are you?" "Among other things." "And your children? Safe? Fed? Happy?" She paused. "Everything you probably assumed we'd never manage." That landed. She saw it in the way his jaw tightened, the brief flash of something that might have been guilt or might have been annoyance. "Mrs. Voss, I want you to understand, the cabin situation wasn't personal. I was simply doing my job." "I understand perfectly. You were going to throw 4 children into the snow because paperwork said you could." She kept her voice level. "And now you want to discuss business with the man who gave us shelter. Interesting timing. I don't appreciate your tone. And I don't appreciate land agents who show up uninvited. But here we are." Before Milhouse could respond, Garrick appeared in the doorway. He looked between them, reading the tension instantly. "Edgar." His voice was flat. "Didn't expect to see you out here." "Mr. Thorne, I've come on behalf of the Central Railroad Company. They're interested in purchasing right-of-way through your property. Very generous terms." "No." "You haven't heard the offer." "Don't need to. Answer's no. Same as it was last month, and the month before that, and every other time someone's asked." Milhouse's smile tightened. "The railroad is coming through this territory whether you cooperate or not. You could profit from it, or you could be left behind. Your choice." "Then I choose being left behind." Garrick moved into the office, his presence somehow making the space feel smaller. "Anything else?" "You're making a mistake." "Wouldn't be my first. But it's my land and my mistake to make." He gestured toward the door. "Have a safe ride back." Milhouse looked like he wanted to argue further, but something in Garrick's expression must have changed his mind. He nodded stiffly and left, his footsteps echoing through the house. After he was gone, Garrick turned to Rowena. "You know him?" "He's the one who came to repossess my cabin the morning after Thomas died." "Ah." Garrick's expression darkened. "Should have hit him." "Would have been satisfying." Still time. But he didn't move, just stood there looking thoughtful. "Railroad's pushing hard. They're up to something." "What do you mean?" "They don't just send land agents for courtesy visits. They're planning something bigger." He rubbed his jaw. "Question is what, and how much trouble it's going to cause." The answer came 3 days later. Rowena was in the kitchen helping Rosa prepare dinner when they heard shouting from outside. She moved to the window and saw smoke, thick black smoke rising from somewhere near the eastern pastures. "Fire!" someone yelled. "Fire in the storage barn!" Chaos erupted. Ranch hands ran in every direction, some heading for the barn, others racing to move the horses before panic spread. Garrick appeared from nowhere, shouting orders, organizing people with the kind of calm authority that only came from experience. "Rosa, keep the children inside," Rowena said, already moving toward the door despite her still healing feet. "Where are you going?" "To help." "You can barely walk." "Then I'll crawl if I have to." Outside, the scene was controlled mayhem. The barn was fully engulfed, flames reaching toward the sky. Men formed bucket lines from the well, passing water hand to hand, but it was clear the barn was lost. The priority now was keeping the fire from spreading. Rowena found herself at the end of one bucket line, passing containers forward as fast as they came. Her feet screamed in protest, her arms burned with effort, but she didn't stop. Nobody did. They worked for hours until the barn finally collapsed in on itself and the fire began dying down to smoldering ruins. By the time it was over, everyone was black with soot and exhausted beyond words. Garrick stood looking at the wreckage, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to Graybeard, the older ranch hand, who seemed to be his second in command. "This wasn't an accident." "How do you know?" "Because that barn was stone and mortar. Doesn't just catch fire on its own." He pointed to something in the ruins. "See that? Accelerant burn pattern. Someone did this deliberately." A murmur ran through the assembled hands. Suspicious looks started getting exchanged. "Who had access to that barn?" Garrick's voice cut through the murmuring. "Everyone, boss. It's where we store equipment." "Then everyone's a suspect until we figure this out." He looked around at his people. "Whoever did this is going to answer for it. But right now, everyone's too tired to think straight. Get some food, get some sleep. We'll sort this in the morning." People dispersed slowly, unwilling to leave but too exhausted to do anything else. Rowena found Garrick still standing by the ruins an hour later. The sun was setting, painting the smoke-streaked sky in shades of orange and red. "You think it's connected?" she asked. "To the money being stolen?" "Has to be. Too much of a coincidence otherwise." He kicked at a piece of charred wood. "Someone's trying to bleed this place dry. First the theft, now sabotage." "Why?" "Because if I'm dealing with internal problems, I'm distracted, vulnerable." He looked at her. "Which means whoever's behind this is probably working for someone else. Someone who wants this ranch to fail." "The railroad?" "Maybe. Or one of a dozen other groups who'd profit from me selling." He ran a hand through his soot-stained hair. "Hell, could be Silas Mercer. Man's been trying to buy Iron Mesa for years." "Who's Silas Mercer?" "Land baron. Owns half the territory already, wants the other half. Real piece of work. Buys up struggling ranches for pennies, then sells the land to developers for fortunes. He's been circling Iron Mesa like a vulture for years." Rowena thought about that, about how vulnerable they all were, how easily everything could be taken away. "What are you going to do?" "Find whoever's responsible, and make sure they understand that attacking this ranch means attacking me personally." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. "Nobody touches what's mine and gets away with it." She should have been scared, should have been thinking about grabbing her children and running before things got worse. But instead she felt something else entirely. Relief. Because, for the first time in years, someone was willing to fight for what mattered. And whether Garrick knew it or not, that included her and her children now. They'd become part of what he was protecting. And Rowena realized with sudden clarity that she was done running, done accepting whatever scraps the world offered, done being grateful just to survive. If Iron Mesa was going to fight, then she was going to fight too. "Tell me what you need," she said. Garrick looked at her, really looked at her, seeing past the widow and the desperate mother to something else underneath. "You sure? This could get dangerous." "I walked 43 miles through hell. Dangerous doesn't scare me anymore." Something like respect flickered in his eyes. "All right then. Tomorrow, we start figuring out who's betraying us, and then we make them regret it." They stood there together as darkness fell, both of them covered in soot, both exhausted, both refusing to surrender. Behind them, Iron Mesa Ranch settled into uneasy quiet. But the war for its survival had only just begun. The investigation started at dawn, before most of the hands had finished breakfast. Garrick pulled aside the men he trusted most. Graybeard, A younger hand named Billy, who'd been with the ranch since he was 14, and surprisingly, Rowena. "You don't have to be part of this," he told her as they gathered in his office. "Could get ugly. I found the theft in the books. I'm already part of it." He didn't argue, just spread a hand-drawn map of the ranch across his desk. "Fire started here." He pointed to where the barn had stood. That building was isolated, stone construction, kept mostly dry goods and equipment. Nothing that should have burned that fast or that hot. "Unless someone wanted it to," Billy said. He was maybe 20, with sandy hair and a nervous way of fidgeting when he talked. "I saw Pete Garner near there yesterday evening. Thought it was odd because he usually works the north pastures." "Pete's been here 3 years," Graybeard said. "He's solid." "So was Vernon, supposedly." Garrick's voice was flat. "And he was either stealing or helping someone steal for months." "You really think Pete would sabotage us?" "I think someone did. And right now everyone's a suspect until they're not." He looked at each of them in turn. "I want to know where every hand was yesterday evening, who they were with, what they were doing. Someone saw something, even if they don't realize it yet." They spent the next 4 hours interviewing every person on the ranch. Most had solid alibis, working in groups, eating dinner, playing cards in the bunkhouse. A few were alone, but their stories checked out when cross-referenced with others who'd seen them. Pete Garner's story didn't check out. "I was checking fence lines on the eastern boundary," he said when Graybeard questioned him. "Solo patrol, like always. Anyone see you out there?" "No, that's kind of the point of solo patrol." "What time did you get back?" Pete hesitated, just for a second. "Maybe an hour before the fire started." But 2 other hands remembered seeing Pete near the barn right around sunset, maybe 30 minutes before the alarm went up. When confronted with this, Pete's story changed. "All right, yeah, I stopped by the barn first. Needed to grab some wire for fence repair." "Thought you said you were on patrol." "I was. Then I came back for supplies." "Convenient that you forgot that detail." Pete's face flushed. "What are you saying? You think I burned down my own workplace?" "I'm saying your story keeps changing, and that makes me nervous." They brought Pete to Garrick's office. The young ranch hand looked scared now, his earlier defensiveness crumbling into panic. "I didn't do anything," he said. "I swear." Garrick studied him with those cold winter eyes. "Then why are you lying about where you were?" "I'm not." "You told Graybeard you were on patrol, then you were getting supplies. Which is it?" Pete's shoulders slumped. "I was meeting someone." The room went very quiet. "Who?" Garrick's voice was dangerous now. "I can't say." "You can and you will, or you're off this ranch tonight." "It's not what you think." "I don't care what it is. Answer the question." Pete looked at the floor. "Mary Henderson, from the Henderson Ranch, about 10 miles east. We've been seeing each other. But her father hates me, so we meet in secret. She was supposed to come by the barn yesterday evening." "And did she?" "Yeah, for about 20 minutes. Then she left through the back way so nobody would see her." He looked up, desperate. "That's why I lied. Not because I set any fire, because I didn't want everyone knowing my business. It was plausible. Stupid, but plausible." Garrick sent Billy to ride to the Henderson Ranch and verify the story. If Mary Henderson confirmed it, Pete was probably innocent. If she didn't, they had their saboteur. While they waited, Rowena went back to the books. If Pete wasn't responsible, then someone else was, and maybe the financial records would reveal a pattern she'd missed. She was 3 hours deep in ledgers when she found it. Not in the numbers this time, but in the handwriting. Vernon, the previous bookkeeper, had distinctive script, neat, careful, with elaborate capitals. Most of the entries were in his hand, but scattered throughout the past 6 months were notes in different handwriting, rougher, more hurried, and those notes always corresponded with the unexplained expenses. Someone had been making entries in the books when Vernon wasn't around. Someone who had access to his office and knew enough about bookkeeping to make their theft look legitimate. Rowena grabbed the ledger and went looking for Garrick. She found him in the stables, checking on a mare that had gone lame. "I found something." He straightened, immediately focused. "Show me." She opened the ledger to one of the suspicious entries. "See this handwriting? It's not Vernon's. Someone else was making entries in the books." Garrick studied it, then called over Graybeard. "You recognize this hand?" The older man squinted at the page. "Hard to say. Could be anyone." We need samples. Get me something written by every hand on this ranch. Old supply requests. Anything with their signature or notes. Boss, that's 22 people. Then it'll take a while. Get started. Billy returned an hour later, looking sheepish. Mary Henderson confirmed Pete's story. Her father's furious, but the timeline matches. Pete was with her when the fire started. One suspect eliminated, 21 more to check. They spent the rest of the day collecting handwriting samples. Some men had barely anything, a signature here, a scrawled note there. Others had left detailed reports or supply requests. Graybeard laid them all out in the office, while Rowena compared each one to the mystery handwriting in the ledger. Most were easy to eliminate. The writing was too different, or the person had only been on the ranch a few months while the theft went back further. But one sample made her pause. It wasn't an exact match, but it was close. Similar letter formations, the same way of crossing T's, nearly identical slant. She showed it to Garrick without saying anything. He looked at the sample, then at the name attached to it, and his expression went hard as stone. You sure? Not completely, but it's the closest match we've got. The name on the sample was Jack Reeves. He'd been with Iron Mesa for 8 years, worked as foreman for the cattle operations, and was generally considered one of Garrick's most trusted men. Could be coincidence, Graybeard said when they showed him. Similar handwriting doesn't prove theft. No, but it's enough to ask questions. Garrick stood. Where's Jack now? South pasture, moving cattle. Get him, quietly. Don't let him know anything's wrong. They waited in tense silence. Rowena felt her stomach knotting. If they were wrong about this, they'd just accused a loyal worker of betrayal. If they were right, they were about to expose a traitor who'd been stealing from them for months. Jack Reeves arrived 20 minutes later, dusty from riding, looking confused about the summons. He was in his 40s, weathered and competent, with the kind of quiet confidence that came from knowing his job inside and out. Boss? Graybeard said you needed me. Have a seat, Jack. Something in Garrick's tone made Jack hesitate. Everything all right? That's what we're trying to figure out. Garrick laid the ledger open on the desk, pointing to one of the suspicious entries. Recognize this handwriting? Jack looked at it, and Rowena watched his face carefully. She saw the moment of recognition, quickly hidden, saw the calculation happening behind his eyes as he decided how to play this. Looks like Vernon's work, he said finally. That's interesting, because we've got samples of Vernon's writing, and this isn't it. Garrick laid out the handwriting comparison. But it does look a lot like yours. I don't know what you're talking about. You're saying you never made entries in these books? I'm the cattle foreman. I don't do bookkeeping. Then how do you explain this? Rowena spoke up for the first time, pointing to a specific entry. This note about purchasing extra salt licks for the north pasture. That's your area of responsibility, and the handwriting matches your supply request from last month. Jack's jaw tightened. Maybe Vernon asked me to make a note one time. That doesn't mean... It happened 17 times over 6 months, she continued, always for amounts under $10. Always vague enough to seem legitimate, and always in your handwriting. That's a lie. The books don't lie, Jack. Garrick's voice was quiet now, which somehow made it worse. You've been skimming from the ranch. Question is why, and who you're working for. For a long moment, Jack said nothing. Then he laughed, short and bitter. You really think this is about money? $200 over 6 months? If I wanted to steal, I could have done better than that. Then what's it about? Insurance. Jack leaned back in his chair, defiant now. I've worked this ranch for 8 years. 8 years of busting my ass, barely making enough to survive, watching you turn down every offer to sell while the rest of us wonder if we'll have jobs next season. That money was my safety net, in case you finally ran this place into the ground. So you stole from me. I took what I earned, what you were too stubborn to get for us legitimately. He stood up. You want to fire me? Fine. But half the hands here feel the same way. We're tired of your pride costing us opportunities. Sit down. I'm done taking orders from you. What happened next was fast. Garrick moved around the desk with surprising speed, grabbing Jack by the collar and slamming him back into the chair hard enough to rattle teeth. You burned that barn, Garrick said, his face inches from Jack's. Admit it. I didn't. You were stealing to fund an exit plan. Then someone offered you more money to sabotage the ranch. Who was it? Mercer? The railroad? Jack's expression flickered. Surprise, then calculation. I don't know what you're talking about. But Garrick had seen it too. The tell. You're working for someone. Who? Nobody, and you can't prove otherwise. Garrick released him with visible effort. Get off my ranch. You've got 1 hour to pack your things and leave. If I see you on my property after that, we're going to have a different kind of conversation. You're making a mistake. Wouldn't be my first, but at least this one I can fix. He turned to Graybeard. Make sure he packs and leaves. Watch him every second. After they dragged Jack out, still protesting, Rowena and Garrick stood alone in the office. He didn't act alone, she said. I know. And he's going straight to whoever hired him. I know that too. Garrick rubbed his face, looking more tired than she'd ever seen him, which means things are about to get worse. He wasn't wrong. 2 days after Jack Reeves left, a group of riders approached Iron Mesa around sunset. 6 men, well armed, led by someone Rowena didn't recognize. A middle-aged man in expensive clothes that looked out of place on the frontier. Garrick met them at the gate, Rowena watching from the porch. She couldn't hear everything they said, but she caught fragments. Reasonable offer. Already told your people no. Think about your workers. My workers are fine. The conversation lasted maybe 10 minutes before the riders left, but Garrick's expression when he returned was dark. That was Silas Mercer, he told her, offering to buy the ranch. Again. What did you say? Same thing I always say. No. He looked out at the darkening prairie. But he made threats. Subtle ones, but threats. Said refusing his offer would have consequences. What kind of consequences? The kind that involve more fires, more sabotage, making it impossible to operate until I'm forced to sell anyway. He turned to her. This is going to get ugly, Rowena. Uglier than anything so far. You should think about taking the children somewhere safe. Where? Back to Blackstone Ridge where we'll starve? Somewhere else where we'll be someone else's problem. She shook her head. We're staying. You don't know what you're signing up for. Don't I? I walked 43 miles because nowhere else was safe. Iron Mesa's the first place that's felt like home since Thomas died. I'm not giving that up without a fight. Something passed between them then, an understanding, maybe, or recognition that they were both too stubborn to quit, even when quitting made sense. All right, Garrick said finally. Then we fight. The attack started small. Fences cut in the night, forcing hands to spend days rounding up scattered cattle. Supply wagons delayed or lost on the road from town. Small fires in grass that could have spread if someone hadn't spotted them in time. Nothing catastrophic, nothing that couldn't be fixed or replaced. But each incident cost time and money and wore down everyone's nerves. The ranch hands started fighting among themselves, stress and suspicion making everyone paranoid. Who could be trusted? Who might be working for Mercer? Every stranger who rode through was viewed with hostility. Every accident was assumed to be sabotage. Rowena found herself working harder than she ever had, trying to keep the administrative side functional while everything else fell apart. The books became her refuge. Numbers didn't lie, didn't betray, didn't require trust. Just logic and attention. Lena had started talking more now, though she still went silent when stressed. She helped Rosa in the kitchen and watched over her brothers with protective intensity. Daniel and Marcus had picked up on the tension, becoming quieter, more cautious. Even Jacob seemed to sense something was wrong, clinging to Rowena more than usual. 3 weeks after Jack Reeves left, Marcus came running to find Rowena in the office, his face pale. Mama, something's wrong with Danny. She found Daniel in the barn, collapsed near the stalls, barely conscious. His face was gray, lips tinged blue, breathing shallow. Get the doctor, she screamed at whoever could hear her. Now! The doctor arrived within the hour, too long, far too long. He examined Daniel while Rowena held her son's hand, terrified. Poison, the doctor said finally. Not a lot, but enough to make him very sick. What did he eat today? Same as everyone else. Breakfast, then. She stopped. He took an apple from the barrel in the barn, around mid-morning. They checked the barrel, found 3 more apples, all of them injected with something toxic. Enough to sicken but not kill. A warning, maybe, or a failed attempt at something worse. Garrick's fury was cold and terrible. He gathered every hand on the ranch and made his position clear. Someone poisoned food meant for children, he said, his voice carrying across the yard. Not supplies, not livestock, but food a child might eat. That crosses every line there is. The assembled hands looked uncomfortable, angry, scared. Good people mixed with potential traitors, and no way to tell which was which. From now on, we operate under siege conditions. Nothing gets onto this property without inspection. No one leaves without my permission. Every barrel, every supply crate, every piece of equipment gets checked. And if I find out anyone here had anything to do with this, he let the threat hang unfinished. Daniel recovered over the next few days, though he remained weak and scared. Rowena barely left his side, fury and fear warring inside her. Someone had tried to hurt her child, had poisoned food meant for a 9-year-old boy. Every protective instinct she had screamed at her to run, to take her children and leave before something worse happened. But she'd learned something over these past months. Running didn't solve problems, it just delayed them. She found Garrick in the barn late one night, checking the horses for the 3rd time that day. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders tight with stress. "You should sleep," she said. "Can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see that kid's face. Your kid." He ran a hand through his hair. "I brought you here, promised you'd be safe. And someone tried to poison your son. That's not your fault, isn't it? Mercer's doing this because I won't sell. Every attack, every fire, every act of sabotage, it's all because I'm too stubborn to surrender." He turned to look at her. "Maybe you were right to be worried. Maybe I should have just sold and moved on." "You don't believe that." "Don't I? What's this land worth if people die protecting it?" Rowena moved closer. "This land is worth fighting for because it's the only thing standing between people like Mercer and complete control. You sell, he wins. Then he goes after the next ranch, and the next, until nobody can say no to him anymore." She paused. "My husband died because he made bad choices, left me with nothing but debts and regrets. You gave me a chance when nobody else would. You think I'm going to let some greedy bastard take that away without a fight? This isn't your battle." "Yes, it is. It became mine the moment you opened that gate." She met his eyes steadily. "We're staying, and we're fighting, so stop trying to protect me from my own decisions." Something shifted in Garrick's expression, surprise maybe, or relief that he wasn't facing this alone anymore. "You're either very brave or completely insane," he said. "Probably both." "Fair enough." He managed a tired smile. "All right, we fight, but we do it smart." "Meaning?" "Meaning we stop reacting to Mercer's attacks and start making some of our own." Over the next week, they planned. Garrick reached out to other small ranchers in the territory, people who'd been pushed around by Mercer, who'd lost land or water rights or been forced into unfavorable deals, people who had their own reasons to resist. Most were too scared to help. Mercer had money, connections, hired guns. Fighting him was suicide, but a few agreed to share information, to watch for Mercer's men moving through their territory, to provide early warning if another attack was coming. It wasn't much, but it was something. Rowena, meanwhile, worked on documenting everything, every attack, every threat, every suspicious incident. She organized the records like a legal case, building evidence that could maybe, someday, be used against Mercer in court. Though they both knew frontier justice rarely worked through courts. The attack they'd been dreading came on a Tuesday night. Rowena woke to the sound of gunshots and immediately knew this was different. Not sabotage. Not warnings. War. She grabbed Lena and the boys, herded them into the cellar beneath the kitchen like Rosa had instructed for emergencies. Jacob was crying. Marcus looked terrified. Daniel was still weak from the poisoning. "Stay here," she told Lena. "Lock the door behind me. Don't open it unless you hear my voice or Rosa's." "Where are you going?" "To help." "Mama, no." But Rowena was already moving. She grabbed the rifle Garrick had insisted she keep in her room, checked that it was loaded, and headed for the stairs. Outside, chaos. Masked riders circling the property, shooting at anything that moved. One of the storage sheds was already burning. Horses screamed in the corrals, panicked by gunfire and flames. Ranch hands fought back from cover, returning fire, but they were clearly outnumbered. Rowena counted at least a dozen attackers, maybe more in the darkness. She spotted Garrick near the main barn, directing his men, firing at riders who got too close. Then she saw one of the attackers circle around behind him, raising a rifle. Rowena didn't think, just aimed and fired. The shot went wide. She'd never been a great marksman, but it was close enough to make the attacker's horse rear. The man fell, his shot going wild, and Garrick spun around in time to put him down properly. He looked toward where the shot had come from, saw Rowena on the porch, and his expression went through about 5 different emotions in 2 seconds. But there wasn't time to argue. The fight was intensifying, riders pushing closer, more buildings catching fire. Rowena reloaded and kept shooting. Not to kill, she wasn't sure she could do that even now, but to provide covering fire, to make the attackers think twice about advancing. The battle lasted maybe 20 minutes, though it felt like hours. Eventually the attackers pulled back, regrouping in the darkness beyond the fence line. A few bodies lay in the dirt, both attackers and one ranch hand Rowena didn't know well. In the sudden quiet, she could hear Rosa calling for her from the house. She ran back inside, nearly falling in her haste. The children? Safe. Still in the cellar. But Rosa's face was grim. There's someone upstairs. I heard footsteps in the children's room. Ice ran through Rowena's veins. Someone had gotten into the house during the attack. Was up there right now, near where her children slept. She took the stairs 2 at a time, rifle ready, fear giving way to fury. If someone had hurt her children... The children's room door was open. Inside, a man stood over the empty beds, looking confused. He turned when he heard her, and she recognized him, one of Mercer's men who'd visited with the group 2 weeks ago. "Where are they?" he demanded. Rowena raised the rifle. "Get out of my house." "The children, where are they?" "I said get out." He reached for his gun. Rowena fired. The shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He went down hard, clutching the wound, cursing. She advanced, keeping the rifle aimed at his head. "You came into my home," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "You threatened my children. I was just supposed to scare you. By doing what? Taking them? Hurting them? Please, I need a doctor. You need to leave, now, before I change my mind about where I aim next." She marched him downstairs at gunpoint, his shoulder bleeding but not critically. Garrick met them at the bottom of the stairs, took one look at the situation, and pulled the man outside. Rowena didn't follow. She went straight to the cellar, knocked on the door. "It's me. It's Mama. Open up." The door opened and 4 terrified children tumbled out, grabbing onto her. She held them tight, shaking, the rifle still in one hand. "Is it over?" Lena whispered. "For now." The attackers didn't return that night. They left their wounded and dead and retreated into darkness. Garrick's men spent the rest of the night putting out fires, tending to injuries, counting losses. 1 ranch hand dead, 3 wounded, 2 buildings destroyed, 6 horses injured or killed, and a clear message delivered: surrender or face worse. Dawn came cold and gray. Rowena stood on the porch, watching the sun rise over scorched earth and destruction, and felt something harden inside her. Mercer had made a mistake tonight. He'd shown his hand too early, proven he was willing to attack families, to threaten children, to burn homes. And in doing so, he'd united everyone on Iron Mesa in a way nothing else could have. This wasn't just Garrick's fight anymore. It was everyone's. Rowena found Garrick standing by the burned barn, staring at the ruins. His face was hard, unreadable. "That man I shot," she said. "The one who came into the children's room. What did he tell you?" "Enough. Mercer sent them. Wanted to kidnap one of your kids, use them as leverage to force me to sell." The words hung between them, terrible in their simplicity. "We can't fight this alone," Rowena said. "We need help." "I know. I've been thinking about that." He turned to face her. "There are people in this territory who hate Mercer as much as we do. Homesteaders he's forced out. Ranchers he's squeezed. Workers he's cheated. If we could unite them, an army of people with nothing left to lose." "Exactly. When do we start?" Garrick managed a grim smile. "Tomorrow. After we bury our dead and fix what we can." He paused. "You didn't have to shoot that man. Could have gotten yourself killed. He was in my children's room." "I know, just thank you for having my back. We're in this together now, for better or worse." They stood there in the gray morning light, 2 people who'd survived too much to quit now, planning their next move in a war neither of them had wanted, but both were determined to win. Behind them, Iron Mesa Ranch settled into exhausted silence. Broken, bloodied, but not beaten. Not yet. Rowena left Iron Mesa 3 days after the attack, riding out before dawn with Graybeard and 2 other hands Garrick trusted completely. The plan was simple in concept, brutal in execution. Visit every homestead, every small ranch, every settlement within 100 miles, and convince people who'd already lost once to risk losing everything again. "You sure about this?" Graybeard asked as they rode through morning mist. "Mercer's got eyes everywhere. He'll know what you're doing. Let him know. Maybe it'll make him nervous. Or make him move faster. Either way, we can't win this fight alone. We need people." She adjusted the rifle across her saddle. People who understand what happens if Mercer gets everything he wants. Their first stop was the Morrison homestead, about 15 miles northeast. James Morrison had been forced to sell half his land to Mercer 2 years ago when drought killed his cattle and he couldn't pay his loans. He answered the door with a shotgun and suspicion written across his weathered face. "Whatever you're selling, I'm not buying." "We're not selling anything, Mr. Morrison. We're offering a chance to take back what was stolen from you." That got his attention. He lowered the shotgun slightly. "Who are you?" "Rowena Voss from Iron Mesa Ranch, and I know Silas Mercer forced you into a bad deal when you were desperate. Same thing he's trying to do to us now." "Heard about the attack on Iron Mesa. Heard some people died." Morrison shook his head. "You're lucky it wasn't worse. Mercer doesn't play around. Which is why we need to stop him before he gets stronger." "Stop him?" Morrison laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Lady, men like Mercer don't get stopped. They get richer and meaner until they own everything and everyone. Best you can do is survive." "By giving him whatever he wants? Letting him take everything you worked for?" "I'm alive. My family's alive. That's worth more than pride." Rowena understood that logic. She'd used it herself not long ago. But something had changed in her during that 43-mile walk, during the poisoning attempt on Daniel, during the attack that brought men into her children's room. "You're right," she said. "Survival matters most. But what happens when Mercer decides he wants the other half of your land, or your water rights, or decides you're in the way of some railroad deal?" She met his eyes. "How long until survival means you've got nothing left to survive with?" Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then his wife appeared behind him, a thin woman with hard eyes. "Tell them about Tommy," she said. "Sarah, that's not—" "Tell them." Morrison's face crumbled slightly. "Our son, 16 years old, worked for Mercer after we lost the land, trying to help pay off what we still owed. There was an accident at one of the mines, cave-in. Tommy was killed along with 4 other boys. Mercer paid us $50, Sarah continued, her voice flat. Said that was generous. Said the mine was safe, and it was the boys' fault for being careless. She stepped forward. So don't tell me about survival, Mrs. Voss. We survived, but we lost everything that mattered anyway. The silence stretched between them, heavy with grief. I'm sorry, Rowena said quietly. I can't imagine... Can you stop him? Sarah cut her off. Can you actually do something that matters? Or are you just another person trying to make themselves feel better by fighting back before they lose? It was a fair question. Brutal, but fair. I don't know, Rowena admitted. Maybe we'll fail. Maybe Mercer's too powerful and too connected and we're all just delaying the inevitable. She paused. But I'd rather fail fighting than succeed at surrender. And I think Tommy deserved better than $50 and an empty apology. Something passed between the two women. Understanding maybe, or just recognition of shared rage. What do you need? Sarah asked. Over the next 2 weeks, they visited 17 homesteads, heard 17 different stories of loss, betrayal, and survival. Some people refused to help, too scared or too broken to risk anything more. Rowena didn't blame them. She understood fear intimately, but others listened. Others remembered their own grievances, their own losses, their own moments of powerless fury when Mercer or his people had taken something that couldn't be replaced. A widow whose husband died in suspicious circumstances right after refusing to sell his water rights. A farmer who lost his land to debt Mercer had deliberately orchestrated by controlling supply prices. 3 brothers who'd watched their family ranch get carved up and sold piece by piece until nothing remained. An old cowboy whose pension from Mercer's mining operation mysteriously vanished along with the man who'd promised it. Each story added weight to what Rowena was building, Not just an alliance, but a reckoning. She returned to Iron Mesa exhausted, saddle sore, and cautiously hopeful. Garrick met her at the gate, and the relief on his face was almost worth the brutal 2 weeks of riding. "How many?" he asked. 43 people willing to help, maybe more if word spreads." 43. He let out a breath. "That's more than I expected." Most of them aren't fighters. They're farmers, widows, old men with nothing left to lose. But they're angry, and they're tired of being afraid. Angry and afraid is good. We can work with that. He helped her down from her horse. "Mercer's been quiet while you were gone. Too quiet." "Meaning?" "Meaning he's planning something big. My contacts in town say he's been hiring more men, not ranch hands, enforcers." Rowena felt ice in her stomach. "How many? At least 20? Maybe 30? Garrick's expression was grim. "He's not doing small raids anymore. He's preparing for something final. Then we need to move faster." They gathered everyone who'd agreed to help, meeting at an abandoned grain mill halfway between Iron Mesa and the nearest town. 43 people became 52 when others heard about the gathering and showed up uninvited. The crowd was a strange mixture, old and young, men and women, some who could barely hold a rifle and others who looked like they'd been waiting years for this chance. Garrick stood before them, and Rowena watched him transform from the quiet, isolated rancher she'd first met into something else entirely. A leader, someone people would follow into hell if he asked. "Most of you know why you're here," he said, his voice carrying across the assembled group. "Silas Mercer has been taking from this territory for years. Land, water, lives. He does it through legal manipulation, through intimidation, through violence when legal methods fail. And he does it because he's never faced real consequences." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. "I'm not going to lie to you about what we're facing. Mercer has money, connections, and hired guns. Fighting him means risk. Some of us might die. Some of us might lose what little we have left." He paused. "But if we don't fight, we lose anyway. Slowly, piece by piece, until there's nothing left but whatever scraps Mercer decides to leave us." "What's the plan?" someone called out, one of the brothers whose family ranch had been destroyed. "We hit him where it hurts most, his money." Garrick unfolded a map across a makeshift table. "Mercer controls most of his territory through mining operations and land speculation. The mines are his main income source. If we can disrupt operations, cost him money, make it unprofitable to keep expanding—" "You're talking about sabotage," an old farmer interrupted. "That's criminal." "So is poisoning children," Rowena said, stepping forward. "So is burning homes and killing workers and forcing people into impossible debt. Mercer's been committing crimes for years. The only difference is he does it with lawyers and contracts." "She's right," Sarah Morrison spoke up. "My son died in Mercer's mine because he cut corners on safety to save money. Nobody called that criminal. They called it an unfortunate accident." The mood in the room shifted, anger replacing hesitation. "We're not murderers," Garrick continued. "We're not going to kill workers who are just trying to survive like the rest of us. But we can collapse tunnels, destroy equipment, make it expensive enough that Mercer's investors start questioning whether this territory is worth the trouble." "And if he retaliates?" someone asked. "He will retaliate. Count on it. Which is why we need people watching his movements, ready to defend their homes when he strikes back. This isn't one battle. It's a campaign." They spent the next 3 hours planning. Garrick organized people into groups based on skills and location. Some would handle reconnaissance, tracking Mercer's men and reporting their movements. Others would focus on the mines, using their knowledge of tunnel systems and explosive techniques. A few would coordinate supply lines, making sure everyone had what they needed. Rowena found herself managing communication, a network of riders who would carry messages between groups, coordinate timing, ensure everyone knew what was happening. It was unglamorous work, but critical. An uncoordinated resistance would get crushed. Unity was their only advantage. The first action came 5 days later. One of Mercer's mining operations, the Silver Creek site, where Tommy Morrison had died, experienced a catastrophic equipment failure. The main pump system that kept the lower tunnels dry mysteriously broke, flooding 3 levels and forcing evacuation. No one was hurt, but operations shut down for at least a month while repairs were made. 2 days after that, a supply wagon heading to another mine got lost and ended up in a ravine, destroying thousands of dollars worth of equipment and blasting materials. Then fences at one of Mercer's holding pastures were cut, allowing cattle to scatter across miles of territory. It took Mercer's men a week to round them all up, and several were lost entirely. Small victories, nothing decisive, but each one cost Mercer money and made him look weak. And weakness, in frontier territory controlled by reputation and fear, was contagious. Ranch hands started leaving Mercer's employment. Investors began asking uncomfortable questions. Local businessmen who'd been eager to work with Mercer suddenly became less available. But Rowena knew they were running on borrowed time. Eventually, Mercer would strike back, and when he did, it would be overwhelming. The attack came in the form they least expected. Not violence, not raids or fires or sabotage. Legal action. Mercer filed claims with the Territorial Land Office, producing documents that allegedly proved Iron Mesa's boundaries had been surveyed incorrectly years ago. According to his paperwork, a significant portion of Garrick's ranch, including the main water source, actually belonged to Mercer through a complicated chain of previous sales and transfers. "It's all fabricated," Garrick said, staring at the documents the marshal had delivered. "These transfer records, these survey reports, none of it existed until 2 weeks ago." "Can you prove they're fake?" Rowena asked. "Probably, eventually, but that takes time, and lawyers, and Mercer's lawyers are better than anyone I can afford." "So what does this mean?" "It means he's found a way to take what he wants without firing a shot. If the land office rules in his favor, I'll have 30 days to vacate the disputed territory, which happens to include this house, most of the pastures, and the only reliable water for miles." Rowena felt sick. They'd been fighting the wrong battle. While they sabotaged mines and cut fences, Mercer had been building a legal case to simply steal everything through paperwork. "There has to be something we can do." "There is." Garrick's expression was hard. "We go to the territorial capital and fight this in person. Present our own evidence, expose Mercer's documents as fraud, and hope the land office actually cares about truth instead of whoever pays them more." "That's a 4-day ride. At least." "I know. And Mercer knows too. Which means he'll probably attack while I'm gone, when the ranch is vulnerable." They stared at each other, both understanding the impossible choice. Leave to fight the legal battle and risk losing everything to violence, or stay to defend the ranch and lose everything to legal theft. "I'll go," Rowena said. "What?" "I'll go to the capital. I've been managing the books. I know the financial records. I can present the evidence." She spoke quickly, working through the plan as she said it. "You need to stay here and coordinate the defense, but someone has to fight this legal challenge, and it doesn't have to be you." "Rowena, you're not a lawyer. Neither are you. But I can read, I can speak, and I can make a case. Besides, Mercer won't expect it. He's counting on you either staying here or leaving the ranch vulnerable. He won't be watching for a widow to show up at the land office." Garrick was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "This is dangerous. If Mercer realizes what you're doing, everything we're doing is dangerous. But sitting here waiting for him to take everything legally is just slow surrender. You'd have to take the children. Too risky to leave them here if things go bad." "I know. We'll manage. And you'd need protection, at least 2 good riders." "Then give me 2 good riders." He studied her face, looking for doubt or fear. She showed him neither, not because she didn't feel them, but because she'd learned that fear and determination could coexist. "You've come a long way from that woman who stumbled through my gate half dead," he said finally. "That woman was always this person. She just didn't have a reason to prove it yet." They left before dawn 2 days later. Rowena, the 4 children, Billy, the young ranch hand, and a tough older woman named Margaret who'd lost her homestead to Mercer and knew how to shoot. The ride to the territorial capital would take at least 4 days if they pushed hard, longer if they tried to keep the children comfortable. Rowena chose speed over comfort. Every hour they delayed gave Mercer more time to prepare counter-arguments or bribe officials. The journey was grueling. Daniel was still weak from the poisoning, struggling to stay on his horse. Marcus and Jacob rode double with Billy, both boys exhausted and miserable. Only Lena seemed unbothered by the pace, grimly determined like her mother. They stopped twice each day, brief rests to water the horses and let the children eat. No fires, no proper camps, just hard riding and harder sleeping on cold ground. On the third night, camped in a small canyon, Margaret shook Rowena awake. Someone's following us. Rowena was instantly alert, reaching for the rifle beside her bedroll. How many? Can't tell. Spotted them twice today, keeping distance. Could be innocent travelers. Could be Mercer's men. Wake Billy. Tell him to saddle the horses quietly. We leave in 10 minutes. The children will be fine. We've got no choice. They rode through the night, pushing the horses harder than was safe, putting distance between themselves and whoever was trailing them. By morning, they'd gained enough space that Margaret couldn't spot their pursuers anymore. But Rowena knew they were still being followed, could feel it like pressure between her shoulder blades. They reached the territorial capital late on the fourth day, exhausted and filthy. The town was larger than anywhere Rowena had been, with actual paved streets and buildings that rose 2 or 3 stories. It felt overwhelming after months at the ranch. She found a boarding house that would take them, paid for 2 rooms with money Garrick had given her, and immediately asked directions to the territorial land office. They close at 5, the boarding house owner said. You'll have to wait until morning. Morning felt like forever away. But there was no choice. Rowena spent the evening going through the documents she'd brought. Property records, original surveys, purchase receipts, everything that proved Iron Mesa's boundaries were legitimate. She organized them obsessively, checking and rechecking, making sure she could present a clear case. Lena sat with her, helping sort papers without being asked. Are we going to win? Her daughter asked quietly. I don't know, sweetheart, but we're going to try. What if we don't? What if they make us leave Iron Mesa? Was a question Rowena had been avoiding. What if they lost everything again? Where would they go? What would they do? Then we figure something else out, she said finally, like we always do. I don't want to leave. I like it there. Rosa's teaching me to cook and the horses and... Lena's voice cracked. I don't want to lose another home. Rowena pulled her daughter close. Neither do I, baby. Neither do I. The land office opened at 8. Rowena was there at 7:30, waiting with her stack of documents and 3 exhausted children. Jacob had stayed at the boarding house with Margaret, too young for this kind of meeting. The clerk who greeted her was middle-aged and professionally bored. Help you? I need to file a challenge to a boundary dispute. Case involving Iron Mesa Ranch and Silas Mercer. His expression changed immediately, became more alert, more wary. That case is already being reviewed by the Surveyor General. He'll make a ruling within 30 days. I'm aware. I'm here to present evidence that Mr. Mercer's documents are fraudulent. You're representing Iron Mesa? Yes. And you are? Rowena Voss. I manage the ranch's financial and administrative records. The clerk looked her up and down, clearly skeptical that a woman could represent property interests. Is Mr. Thorne aware you're here? Mr. Thorne is defending the ranch from armed attack. I'm here because someone needs to fight this legal theft before it's too late. That got his attention. Armed attack? Mercer's been trying to force Iron Mesa to sell for months. When sabotage and violence failed, he filed this claim. It's part of a coordinated campaign to steal land through any means necessary. Those are serious accusations, ma'am. Yes, they are, which is why I'm here to prove them. The clerk hesitated, then said, Wait here. He disappeared into a back office. Rowena waited, her heart pounding, aware that she was gambling everything on the hope that someone in this building actually cared about justice instead of money. 20 minutes later, the clerk returned with an older man, gray-haired, stern-faced, wearing a suit that marked him as important. Mrs. Voss, I'm Surveyor General Hamilton. I understand you have concerns about the Mercer-Iron Mesa boundary dispute? Yes, sir. I have evidence that Mr. Mercer's documentation is fabricated. That's a strong claim. I hope you can support it. I can. If you'll give me the chance to present my case. Hamilton studied her for a long moment. Then he said, Very well. Come with me. The meeting lasted 4 hours. Rowena presented every piece of evidence she'd brought. The original survey from when Garrick purchased Iron Mesa, transfer documents proving clear chain of ownership, financial records showing continuous operation and tax payments. Then she systematically dismantled Mercer's case, pointing out inconsistencies, impossible dates, signatures that didn't match historical records. Hamilton listened without interrupting, taking notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. His expression gave nothing away. When she finished, He sat back in his chair. You've made a compelling argument, Mrs. Voss, but you understand this is ultimately a legal matter. Mr. Mercer has substantial documentation supporting his claim. Documentation that only appeared recently, after months of failed attempts to take the ranch by force. Do you have proof that the documents are fabricated, beyond inconsistencies and suspicious timing? Not proof that would hold up in a courtroom, but anyone with eyes can see these documents weren't part of the original survey records. They're too clean, too convenient, too perfectly aligned with what Mercer needs them to say. Unfortunately, convenient isn't grounds for dismissal. Rowena felt desperation creeping in. Sir, with respect, this isn't just about property boundaries. Mercer has been terrorizing this territory for years, forcing people out of their homes, killing workers in unsafe mines, using violence and intimidation to take whatever he wants. If he wins this claim, he doesn't just get Iron Mesa. He gets confirmation that his methods work. And what happens to the next ranch he targets? The next family that stands in his way? Hamilton was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I'll need time to review everything, both your evidence and Mr. Mercer's. A ruling will be issued within 3 weeks. 3 weeks? Mercer could destroy Iron Mesa in 3 weeks. I understand your concern, but the law requires proper review. I won't rush a decision this important. He stood, signaling the meeting was over. I'll send my ruling to Iron Mesa Ranch by courier. Until then, both parties must maintain the current property boundaries. No escalation, no violence, no attempts to occupy disputed territory. And if Mercer ignores that, then he'll face legal consequences. But Mrs. Voss? Hamilton looked at her seriously. If you escalate, if your people continue the sabotage and raids, that will factor into my decision. I can't rule in favor of a party that's actively breaking the law, regardless of how justified you feel. It was a warning and a trap. Stop fighting back, and Mercer would crush them. Keep fighting, and they'd lose the legal battle by default. Rowena left the land office feeling defeated despite having made the best case she could. 3 weeks felt like forever. Anything could happen in 3 weeks. She gathered the children and returned to the boarding house, already planning the ride back. They needed to warn Garrick, needed to prepare for whatever Mercer would throw at them next. But when they reached the boarding house, Margaret met them at the door, her face pale. There's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent. Inside, in the small sitting room, waited a man Rowena had never seen before. He was young, well-dressed, with nervous energy that made him seem about to jump out of his skin. Mrs. Voss, I'm Jonathan Price. I worked for Silas Mercer, bookkeeper for his mining operations. He glanced around nervously. I need to talk to you about the land claim, about everything. Rowena's heart started racing. Why? Because I'm the one who helped falsify those property documents, and I can prove it. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Why would you tell me this? Because my brother died in the Silver Creek mine, the one that flooded recently. He'd been working there for 2 years, sending money home to help our mother. Mercer paid her $100 and told her to be grateful. Jonathan's hands were shaking. I went along with the document fraud because I was scared of losing my job. But I'm done being scared. I'm done helping him destroy people. What do you have? Everything. Original surveys before Mercer had them altered, financial records showing payments to the forger. Communication between Mercer and the surveyor he bribed to support his false claim. He pulled papers from inside his coat. Enough to bury him in court if it's presented right. Rowena stared at the documents, barely believing what she was seeing. This was it. The evidence they needed. The proof that could end Mercer's legal challenge and expose him for the fraud he was. Why not go to the Surveyor General yourself? Because I'm a nobody, a bookkeeper who participated in fraud. They'll arrest me before they listen to me. But you've already presented your case. You've got credibility. If you bring this evidence, Hamilton will have to act on it. It made sense, but something felt wrong about the timing, about how perfect this solution seemed. How did you find me? She asked carefully. I've been watching the land office for days, waiting for someone from Iron Mesa to show up. When I saw you go in this morning, I followed you here. And Mercer doesn't know you're here? Not yet. But he will soon. I took these documents from his office last night. By tomorrow, he'll know they're gone. Which means you just made yourself a target. Jonathan nodded, looking terrified but determined. I know. But maybe that makes us even. You came all this way to fight him legally. I'm trying to help finish the job." Rowena looked at Margaret, who shrugged. This was her call. "All right," she said finally. "We take this evidence back to Hamilton in the morning. But tonight, you stay here where we can protect you. If Mercer's men are looking for you, they are. I saw them at my boarding house this morning. That's why I came straight here." So they were all targets now. But at least they weren't alone. That night, while the children slept and Margaret kept watch, Rowena went through Jonathan's evidence piece by piece. It was damning. Absolutely, completely damning. Proof of fraud, bribery, falsified documents, enough to not just defeat Mercer's land claim, but potentially bring criminal charges. But it also meant they'd escalated this fight to a level where Mercer had nothing left to lose. If this evidence reached the authorities, he'd face prison. Men like Mercer didn't go quietly to prison. They burned everything down first. She was still awake when Billy came running up the stairs, breathless. "Mrs. Voss, we've got a problem. Just got word from one of our people in town. Mercer knows about Jonathan. He's gathering men, planning to search every boarding house in the city." "When?" "Tonight. Maybe within the hour." Rowena stood immediately, mind racing. They couldn't stay here. Couldn't risk Mercer's men finding them with the evidence. But where could they go in a city where Mercer had connections and resources? Then she remembered the Surveyor General's office. It was government property, protected by territorial law. Mercer couldn't just storm in there without consequences. "Wake everyone. We're moving now. Bring everything." "Where are we going?" "To deliver evidence that's going to end this war one way or another." They gathered the children, still half asleep and confused. Jonathan looked terrified, Margaret grim, Billy determined. They moved through dark streets like fugitives, jumping at every sound, expecting Mercer's men to appear at every corner. The land office was locked and dark. Rowena hammered on the door anyway, knowing this was insane, knowing they looked like criminals breaking in. A night watchman finally appeared, elderly and irritated. "Office is closed. Come back tomorrow." "I need to see Surveyor General Hamilton. It's urgent." "Everything's urgent at midnight. Come back." "Tell him Rowena Voss is here with evidence of fraud in the Mercer land claim. Tell him if he doesn't see me now, the evidence might disappear before morning." Something in her tone must have convinced him. He disappeared inside and Rowena waited, counting heartbeats, watching the dark streets for approaching danger. Hamilton appeared 10 minutes later, wearing a robe over his nightclothes and looking deeply unhappy. But he let them inside, locked the door behind them, and listened as Jonathan laid out everything. By dawn, Hamilton had reviewed every document. His expression had gone from skeptical to shocked to coldly furious. "This is—" He paused, searching for words. "This is the most blatant case of fraud I've seen in 20 years. If even half of this is legitimate, it's all legitimate," Jonathan said. "I helped create some of it. I can testify to everything." "Then Silas Mercer is going to prison, and every land claim he's made in the past decade will be reviewed and likely overturned." Hamilton looked at Rowena. "You realize what this means? The territory's most powerful businessman exposed as a criminal? The legal and economic chaos that will follow? I realize what it means if he's not stopped. More people dead, more families destroyed, more land stolen through fraud." Hamilton nodded slowly. "You're right. Of course you're right." He began organizing documents with sudden purpose. "I'll prepare an emergency ruling this morning. The Mercer land claim will be rejected, and I'll be forwarding this evidence to the Territorial Marshal for criminal investigation." "How long until Mercer knows?" "Word will spread fast. By noon, everyone in the capital will know. By tomorrow, it'll reach the outlying territories." He looked at her seriously. "Mrs. Voss, you need to get back to Iron Mesa. Warn Garrick Thorne. Because when Mercer learns he's lost everything, legally, financially, publicly, he's going to lash out. And your ranch will be his primary target." Rowena had already reached the same conclusion. They left the capital within the hour, riding hard despite exhausted horses and traumatized children. Jonathan came with them. He'd be safer at Iron Mesa than anywhere in the capital once Mercer's people realized what he'd done. The ride back took 3.5 days of brutal pace. By the time Iron Mesa appeared on the horizon, both horses and riders were running on pure determination. Garrick met them at the gate, his relief visible. Then he saw their expressions and understood immediately. "It's done? The legal fight's over. We won. But Mercer knows by now, and Hamilton thinks, he's going to attack with everything he has left. Garrick finished. When? Soon. Maybe days. Maybe hours. He nodded, already moving into command mode. We've been preparing. Got people stationed at all the boundaries, supplies stockpiled, defensive positions prepared. If he wants a war, we'll give him one. That night, as Rowena tucked exhausted children into bed and tried to pretend everything would be fine, she stood at the window and looked out over Iron Mesa's dark grasslands. Somewhere out there, Mercer was gathering forces, preparing his final assault, betting everything on violence since legal methods had failed, and all they could do was wait for the storm they knew was coming. She thought about the 43 miles she'd walked to get here, about everything that had happened since, how a desperate widow had become something else entirely, how survival had transformed into resistance, and resistance into war. Behind her, Lena appeared silently. Mama, are we going to be okay? Rowena wanted to lie, wanted to promise everything would be fine, but her daughter deserved better than false comfort. I don't know, sweetheart, but we're together, we're not giving up, and we're surrounded by people who won't quit either. That's got to count for something. Lena nodded and went back to bed. And Rowena stood at the window a while longer, watching darkness and waiting for war. The attack came at dawn on a Sunday, when the sky was still gray and most of Iron Mesa was just starting to stir. Rowena was in the kitchen with Rosa, preparing breakfast for the children, when the first shots rang out. Not random fire this time. Coordinated, disciplined, the sound of men who'd been paid well and knew exactly what they were doing. Get the children to the cellar, Rowena said, already moving. Now! Rosa didn't argue, just grabbed Jacob and started herding the other children toward safety. Lena looked back once, fear and something else, maybe resignation, in her eyes before disappearing down the stairs. Outside, chaos erupted faster than anything Rowena had seen before. Riders poured through the eastern fence line, at least 30 of them, all armed and shooting at anything that moved. These weren't the ragtag hired guns from previous attacks. These were professionals, and they'd come to finish this permanently. Garrick was already organizing defense from the main barn, shouting orders, directing his people to prepared positions. The ranch hands who'd stayed loyal fought back hard, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Rowena grabbed her rifle and took position at an upstairs window, exactly like they'd practiced. She wasn't a great shot, but she could provide covering fire, make the attackers think twice about advancing. The battle was brutal and immediate. One of the storage sheds exploded. Someone had gotten close enough to plant explosives. Flames shot into the dawn sky, thick black smoke rolling across the compound. Through the smoke, Rowena saw him. Silas Mercer, sitting on a horse behind the main line of attackers, directing the assault like a general commanding troops. He was too far for a clean shot, but close enough that Rowena could see his expression, cold calculation mixed with rage. A man who'd built an empire through intimidation and was watching it crumble because one stubborn rancher and a desperate widow had refused to quit. She aimed in his direction anyway, fired. The shot went wide, but it got his attention. Mercer turned, looking directly at the window where she stood, and for one frozen moment, their eyes met across the battlefield. Then someone tackled her away from the window just as bullets shredded the frame where she'd been standing. She hit the floor hard, the rifle skittering away, and looked up to see Graybeard crouched beside her. Stay down. That bastard's got sharpshooters picking off anyone visible. I saw Mercer. He's here personally. I know. Means he's desperate. Graybeard crawled to a different window, more protected, and returned fire. Also means if we can take him down, this whole thing might collapse. It was a slim hope, but hope nonetheless. The fighting continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes. Iron Mesa's defenders held their positions, but barely. They were losing ground, being pushed back toward the main house, and everyone knew once they lost the outer buildings, it was over. That's when the reinforcements arrived. Not from Iron Mesa, from everywhere else. The Morrison family came first, James and Sarah leading a group of 6 homesteaders, all armed and furious. Then the 3 brothers whose ranch had been destroyed, bringing friends and neighbors who'd heard what was happening. More people kept arriving, widows who'd lost husbands to Mercer's schemes, farmers he'd cheated, workers he'd abandoned. The 43 people Rowena had recruited had become 70, then 80, then over 100 as word spread through the territory that this was the final battle, The moment that would decide whether Mercer's reign of terror continued or ended. The tide turned. Mercer's hired guns found themselves surrounded, outnumbered by people who weren't fighting for money but for everything they'd lost and everyone they'd loved. Professional killers were good at violence, but they weren't prepared for the fury of desperate people with nothing left to lose. The battle devolved into chaos, hand-to-hand fighting in some places, running gunfights in others. Smoke and dust made it hard to see more than a few yards. Rowena lost track of individuals, just focused on survival and protecting the house where her children hid. She was reloading when she heard the scream. Lena's scream. Rowena's blood turned to ice. She dropped the rifle and ran, not thinking, just moving on pure maternal instinct. Down the stairs, through the kitchen, toward the cellar door, which was open. Standing in the doorway, holding Lena by the arm with a gun pressed to her head, was Jack Reeves. The foreman they'd fired weeks ago, the one who'd been stealing and working for Mercer. "Stop!" he shouted at Rowena. "Stop or I'll kill her!" Behind him, in the cellar, Rosa shielded the three boys with her body. Jacob was crying. Daniel and Marcus looked terrified but frozen in place. Rowena stopped, hands raised, every instinct screaming to rush him, but knowing that would get Lena killed. "Jack," she said, keeping her voice as steady as possible. "Don't do this." "Shut up. You ruined everything, you and Thorne and your stupid pride." He was sweating, eyes wild, desperate. "Mercer promised me land, real money, if I helped him take Iron Mesa. Now he's losing and I've got nothing." "Then leave. Take a horse and leave. Nobody has to die." "Yes, they do. Someone has to pay for this." He pressed the gun harder against Lena's temple. The girl whimpered but didn't struggle, understanding somehow that stillness might keep her alive. "Where's Thorne?" "I don't know." "Liar. Jack, please, get him here, now. Or I start with the girl, then work my way through all four kids until somebody gives me what I want." Rowena's mind raced. Garrick was outside, somewhere in the chaos, probably didn't even know what was happening. She needed to stall, needed to figure out how to save her daughter without getting her killed. "What do you want?" she asked. "Really, what would make you let her go?" "I want my life back. I want—" He stopped, listening. The gunfire outside was dying down. The battle was ending. "What's happening out there?" "Your side's losing." No, that's not—" Mercer said. Mercer lied, like he lies to everyone. Rowena took a small step closer. "You think he cares about you? You're just another tool he used and will discard the second you're not useful." "Shut up. Look at yourself, Jack, holding a 13-year-old girl hostage because a rich man promised you things he never intended to deliver. Is this who you want to be?" I said, "Shut up." But doubt flickered in his eyes. The gun wavered slightly. That's when Garrick appeared behind him, silent as a ghost, and put a knife to Jack's throat. "Let her go," Garrick said quietly. "Right now. Or I open your neck and let you bleed out on the floor." For a frozen second, nobody moved. Then Jack released Lena, and she stumbled forward into Rowena's arms. The gun clattered to the floor. Garrick didn't kill him, just held the knife there, pressing hard enough to draw blood, his expression completely empty of mercy. "Give me one reason," he said. "Please," Jack whispered. I was just—" "You put a gun to a child's head. I wasn't going to actually— I don't care what you were going to do. I care what you did." The knife pressed harder. "But killing you makes me no better than Mercer. So here's what happens instead. You leave. Right now. And if I ever see you in this territory again, if I even hear your name mentioned, I will hunt you down and finish what I started here. Understood?" Jack nodded frantically. Garrick released him and shoved him toward the door. The former foreman scrambled away, nearly falling over himself to escape. Rowena held Lena tight, feeling her daughter shake with delayed shock. The other children climbed out of the cellar, Jacob launching himself at Rowena's legs and refusing to let go. "Everyone okay?" Garrick asked, his voice gentle now. "We're alive." Rowena met his eyes. "What's happening outside?" "It's over. Mercer's men are surrendering or running. We won." He paused. But Mercer himself got away, rode off when he saw how it was going. "Then it's not over." "No, it's not." They found Mercer 3 hours later, holed up in an abandoned mining office near Dead Man Canyon, one of his own properties, ironically. He'd barricaded himself inside with 2 remaining bodyguards and enough ammunition to hold off a small army. But they hadn't come with a small army. They'd come with everyone. Every person who'd fought at Iron Mesa. Every family Mercer had ruined. Every worker he'd cheated. They surrounded the building in grim silence, and the message was clear. This ended today, one way or another. Graybeard called out, "Mercer, you've got 2 options. Come out and face territorial justice, or we burn this building down around you." Silence. Then Mercer's voice, muffled by walls. "You're all trespassing on private property. I'll have you arrested." "By who? The marshal you've been bribing? The officials you've been paying off?" That was Sarah Morrison, stepping forward. "My son died in one of your mines. You paid me $50 like his life meant nothing. You think I care about your property rights? I'll make you all rich. Whatever you want. Land, money, positions in my operations." "We don't want your money," someone shouted. "We want justice." The crowd surged forward, and for a moment Rowena thought they were going to storm the building and tear Mercer apart. But Garrick raised a hand. "Wait." He rode forward alone, stopping just outside the door. "Mercer, you've lost. Your legal claims are exposed as fraud. Your hired guns are either dead or in custody. Every crime you've committed over the past decade is going to be investigated. You've got nowhere left to run." "I've got friends in high places." "Not anymore. Jonathan Price gave testimony. We've got your books, your forged documents, evidence of every bribe and murder you've ordered. Your friends are going to run as far from you as they can." More silence, then the sound of arguing inside. The bodyguards probably realizing they were protecting a sinking ship and starting to reconsider their loyalty. "Last chance," Garrett called. "Come out now, and I personally guarantee you make it to territorial custody alive. Stay in there, and I can't control what happens when people stop being patient." The door opened slowly. One bodyguard came out, hands raised, followed by the second. Then finally Silas Mercer himself, looking nothing like the powerful businessman who'd terrorized the territory for years. He looked old, defeated, scared. The crowd parted as Graybeard and Billy moved forward to restrain him. Mercer's eyes found Rowena in the crowd, and there was such hatred in that look that she almost stepped back. "This is your fault," he said. "You and your children. You should have died in the snow." "But we didn't. We survived. And we kept surviving every time you tried to break us." She moved closer, looking him directly in the eyes. "You built everything on the idea that people would eventually surrender, that fear and desperation would make them quit. But you forgot something." "What?" "People who've already lost everything, don't have anything left to be afraid of. And when enough of those people stand together, not even your money and violence can stop them." They took Mercer away, hauled him off to face territorial justice. The crowd dispersed slowly, people heading back to their homes and lives, processing the fact that the war was finally over. Rowena stood there long after everyone left, looking at the canyon walls and the mining operation that had caused so much suffering. Garrick appeared beside her, equally quiet. "You all right?" he asked. "I don't know. It feels like I should be celebrating, but mostly I'm just tired." "That's normal after something like this. The adrenaline fades and you realize how close everything came to falling apart." "Did we do the right thing? All that violence, all those people who died? You're asking if the cost was worth it?" "I guess I am." Garrick was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I don't know if there's a right answer to that. People died. Property was destroyed. Families were torn apart. Those costs are real, and they don't go away just because we won." He paused. "But if we hadn't fought, Mercer would still be terrorizing this territory. More families would lose their homes. More workers would die in unsafe mines. The cost of not fighting would have been just as high, just spread out over years instead of concentrated into weeks. So we chose the lesser evil. We chose to fight back against someone who'd been hurting people unopposed for too long. Whether that's evil or justice, I'll let history decide." They rode back to Iron Mesa as the sun was setting, painting the prairie in shades of orange and gold. The ranch looked different now, scarred by battle, several buildings destroyed, everything marked by violence. But it was still standing, still theirs. The next few weeks were a blur of reconstruction. People who'd fought together now worked together, rebuilding what had been destroyed. The widow Morrison turned out to be skilled at carpentry and led efforts to repair the burned structures. The three brothers who'd lost their family ranch took up residence in Iron Mesa's bunkhouse and started working as hands. Jonathan Price, the bookkeeper who'd turned against Mercer, stayed on to help Rowena organize finances and ensure everything was documented properly. Iron Mesa slowly transformed from just a ranch into something else, a community. People who'd been scattered and isolated found themselves connected by shared struggle and shared victory. They ate meals together, worked together, celebrated together. The rigid boundaries between owner and worker, between families and individuals, started to blur. Garrick struggled with the change at first. He'd been solitary for so long, keeping everyone at arm's length, that suddenly being surrounded by people constantly felt overwhelming. Rowena found him one evening, sitting alone near the horse corral, looking uncomfortable. "You okay?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Too many people," he admitted. "I can't think with all this noise." "You could ask them to leave. It's your ranch." "Is it, though? Feels like it belongs to everyone now." He didn't sound upset, just confused. "I spent 6 years keeping this place isolated, convincing myself that was strength. Now I've got 50 people calling it home and I don't even know half their names. Is that a bad thing?" "I don't know. It's different." He watched Daniel and Marcus playing with some of the other children, their laughter carrying across the evening air. "Your boys seem happy." "They are. First time in their lives they've felt safe enough to actually be children." "And Lena?" "Getting there. Still has nightmares about Jack, but Rosa's helping her work through it, teaching her to channel fear into something productive." "Cooking?" "Among other things. Yesterday I found her reorganizing the entire supply pantry by alphabetical order. Very thorough." "She gets that from you." Rowena smiled. "Maybe. Or maybe she's just trying to find control in a world that keeps proving how little control any of us actually have." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Garrick said, "I've been thinking about what you said, about Iron Mesa belonging to everyone. And I think you're right." "Meaning?" "Meaning maybe it's time to formalize that. Make it official. Turn this place into something where people who work here have actual stake in what they're building." He turned to look at her. "A cooperative. Workers own shares based on their labor. Families get housing and a cut of profits. It's not charity, and it's not just wages, it's partnership." "That's radical. Most ranches don't work that way. Most ranches didn't just fight a war against the territory's richest businessmen and win. We're not most ranches." He paused. "I want your help making it work. The administrative side, the organization, making sure everyone understands what they're getting into. You're asking me to help you give away your ranch. I'm asking you to help me turn it into something worth keeping, something bigger than one man's pride or property rights." He met her eyes. "You walked 43 miles to give your children a better life. This is me trying to give that to everyone here. It took 3 months to set up the cooperative structure properly. Rowena worked with Jonathan to create fair share systems, organize voting procedures for major decisions, establish clear lines of responsibility. It was complicated, messy, and absolutely unprecedented in the territory. People thought Garrick had lost his mind. Other ranchers mocked him for being weak, for surrendering control, for letting workers have voices in how things operated. But Iron Mesa thrived. Productivity increased because people were working for themselves, not just wages. Problems got solved faster because everyone had investment in solutions. New ideas flourished because innovation was rewarded with actual stake and success. And slowly, other struggling operations started noticing, started asking questions, started wondering if maybe there was a better way to organize labor than the traditional owner-worker hierarchy that left most people barely surviving. Rowena watched it all with a mixture of pride and disbelief. She'd come here desperate and broken, expecting nothing more than temporary survival. Now she was helping architect a new way of organizing an entire ranch, proving that people could build something together that was stronger than anything one person could create alone. Her children were thriving too. Daniel had recovered fully from the poisoning and was learning the horse trade from Graybeard. Marcus was apprenticing with the blacksmith, turning out to have an unexpected talent for metalwork. Jacob, now 4 years old, was spoiled by everyone and spent his days following various adults around like a small, curious shadow. And Lena, quiet, determined Lena, was learning bookkeeping from Jonathan and helping Rosa manage the kitchen operations. At 14, she'd become the bridge between the administrative side and the practical work, translating Rowena's organizational systems into something the workers could actually use. She's going to be terrifying when she grows up, Rosa said one day, watching Lena efficiently reorganize an entire supply system. Smart like her mother, but with that edge of steel that comes from surviving hell. Is that a compliment? Absolutely. This territory needs women like that, women who know how to survive and refuse to just accept whatever scraps the world offers. About 6 months after Mercer's arrest, word came that he'd been sentenced to 20 years for fraud, bribery, and conspiracy to commit murder. His properties were being liquidated, the money distributed to compensate his victims. It wasn't enough. Nothing could truly compensate for lost lives and destroyed futures, but it was something. More importantly, his downfall sent a message through the territory. The powerful weren't untouchable. Money didn't guarantee immunity, and if enough people stood together, they could challenge even the most entrenched interests. Other land barons and business owners who'd been operating like Mercer suddenly became more cautious, more willing to negotiate, more aware that workers and families had limits to what they'd tolerate. The frontier was changing. And Iron Mesa Ranch sat at the center of that change, a living example that there were alternatives to the traditional power structures that had dominated the West for decades. It was late autumn, nearly a year after Rowena had stumbled through Iron Mesa's gates, half dead and desperate, when she finally had time to stop and process everything that had happened. She stood on the porch of the ranch house, rebuilt and expanded to accommodate the growing community, watching the sun set over land that felt like home in a way nowhere else ever had. Garrick appeared beside her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one and they stood together in comfortable silence. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked eventually. "I was thinking about how different everything is now. A year ago, I was burying my husband and preparing to lose everything. Now I'm helping run a cooperative ranch that's apparently becoming famous throughout the territory. Notorious is probably more accurate." "Same thing." She sipped her coffee. "Do you ever regret it? Fighting instead of selling? All the blood and fear and uncertainty?" "Every day," he admitted. "I see the graves of people who died defending this place and wonder if their lives were worth property boundaries. But then I look at what we built from that fight. Not just the ranch, but the whole community. And I think maybe it wasn't about the land at all." "What was it about then?" "Refusing to let fear decide our futures. Proving that ordinary people can push back against power when they're tired enough of being pushed around." He paused. "Your walk through the snow, that 43 miles you dragged yourself and 4 children, that wasn't really about reaching Iron Mesa, was it?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, you could have given up a dozen times, could have stopped in any town, thrown yourself on charity, accepted whatever scraps people offered, but you kept walking. Why?" Rowena thought about that for a long time. Then she said, "Because giving up felt like dying, and I'd already buried too many people to accept that for myself and my children. The walk wasn't about reaching safety. It was about refusing to let the world tell me who I had to be. And now I'm someone I never imagined I could be. Not because I'm stronger or braver than I was, but because I finally had a chance to prove what I could do when I wasn't just trying to survive." She looked at him. "You gave me that chance. This place gave me that chance." "You earned it. I just opened a gate." "Maybe. But sometimes that's all it takes. Someone opening a gate when everyone else has doors locked." She set down her coffee cup. "I should check on the children. Daniel's supposed to be practicing his reading, and Marcus has been avoiding his arithmetic homework." "You're a good mother, Rowena. They're lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one. They gave me a reason to keep going when I had nothing else." She started to leave, then turned back. "Garrick? Thank you. For everything. For taking us in, for protecting us, for fighting alongside us. I never properly said that. You thanked me by saving this ranch, by organizing the resistance, by going to the Capitol, by refusing to quit when any sane person would have run." He smiled, and it transformed his usually hard face into something gentler. "We saved each other, Rowena. That's what families do." Families. The word settled around her like a warm blanket. Not the family she'd been born into or the one she'd tried to build with Thomas. This was something else, a family of choice, of survival, of people who'd fought together and refused to let go of each other in the aftermath. Inside the house, she found her children gathered in the main room. Daniel was reading to Jacob, his voice confident now where it used to stumble. Marcus was sketching something, a diagram of some metalwork project probably, covered in careful measurements. and Lena sat by the window with Rosa, both of them reviewing the next day's meal plans. They looked up when she entered, and four faces smiled at her with genuine happiness. Not just relief at surviving, but actual joy at being alive and together, and home. "Everything okay, Mama?" Lena asked. "Everything's perfect, sweetheart." And for the first time in years, she meant it completely. Later that night, after the children were asleep and the ranch had settled into quiet, Rowena sat at the desk in Garrick's office, her office too now, and pulled out her journal. She'd started keeping one a few months ago, trying to record everything that had happened so someday, when people asked, there would be a real account beyond legends and stories. She wrote about the walk through the snow, about arriving at Iron Mesa more dead than alive, about the fires and the battles and the long fight against Mercer. But mostly she wrote about the people, the ordinary, flawed, determined people who'd stood together when the world expected them to fall apart, because that's what mattered in the end. Not the violence or the victory, but the connections forged in struggle, the way desperation could transform into solidarity, the proof that giving people stake in their own futures created something stronger than any system built on fear and hierarchy. The frontier was changing, and Iron Mesa Ranch stood as evidence that change was possible. That widows could become leaders, that ranch hands could become partners, that children who'd known only loss could find home and happiness. Rowena closed the journal and looked out the window at the dark prairie. Somewhere out there were other families struggling, other people desperate for chances they'd never been given. Other Rowenas walking their own versions of 43 miles, looking for someone willing to open a gate. And she promised herself that Iron Mesa would keep that gate open, would keep proving that there were alternatives to the harsh, hierarchical world most people accepted as inevitable, would keep being a place where people could transform survival into something resembling life. Because that's what the fight had really been about. Not land or money or power, but the simple, radical idea that people deserved better than just barely getting by. That communities could be built on cooperation instead of exploitation. That the future didn't have to repeat the mistakes of the past. The world wouldn't change overnight. The frontier was still brutal, still unforgiving, still full of men like Mercer who built empires on other people's suffering. But now there was proof that resistance was possible, that ordinary people could fight back and win, and sometimes that proof was enough to inspire others to try. Years later, when people talked about Iron Mesa Ranch, they told stories about the widow who walked 43 miles through winter snow, about the battle against Mercer, about the cooperative that changed how the territory thought about land and labor. But the real story was simpler and more profound than any legend. It was about a woman who refused to accept that survival was the best she could hope for. About a man who learned that strength didn't mean isolation. About children who grew up knowing they deserved more than scraps. And about a community built not on power or wealth, but on the stubborn determination of people who'd survived too much to quit before they'd built something worth keeping. The frontier didn't change because of grand gestures or powerful individuals. It changed because ordinary people, broken, flawed, desperate ordinary people, decided that enough was enough and started building something better. One ranch at a time, one family at a time, one person at a time, refusing to let the world tell them who they had to be. That was the legacy of Iron Mesa. And it started with a widow and 4 children walking through snow, refusing to die quietly. That kind of determination couldn't be killed. It could only spread.